the 18th of November 2012, the 30th of November 2012. Those were the release dates in the US and Europe for the Wii U. That's right, it's been 10 years since that console released, and I'm interested to see what the perception is 10 years on. So I'm being joined this week by some very special guests. Dan Navaroli from the Nerdic Gods podcast, Tucker Hazel, and Matt, one of my game dev friends. But first, we'll start with Mr. Navaroli. How are you, mate?
Uh-oh. What happened?
No.
Discord. What happened to Discord? Are you there?
I think we're good, yes. How are you, mate?
Okay. Are we good? Okay.
Yeah, a little bit of
Hello.
a ropey handling.
Hello. Yeah.
So, tell me about kind of... We'll start. We've got a number of things I wanted to kind of touch on. So we'll start with, what was your initial perception and thought on the Wii U when it was obviously revealed at E3 2011?
Yeah, that's... I'm old. As you could tell, I'm old. So I was all in at E3 at the time. And the Wii U just never left an impression to start with, which was not a good sign. I remember seeing the... They're making a big deal out of the pad. I forget what it's actually called. It probably has a name. The gamepad. Yeah. And it's having a cool concept, but it already looking like a Fisher Price toy.
Yeah.
And it just you could tell that they weren't really putting a lot into that tech.
Yeah. It was,
or at least the hardware side of it.
Yeah. It was one of those interesting things that, obviously preparing for this piece and going back and looking at it, it's notable that the entirety of that E3 reveal in 2011, and there's so much of the marketing focused on the gamepad, which obviously got into people's minds, along with obviously the terrible name, which is another thing we'll come on to momentarily, that people thought it was just an accessory for the Wii.
Right. Well, the entire Wii itself had insane, ridiculous names, like the stupid thing you put on, the Motion Plus. Like, why would it not be just do you buy the game pad for the Wii? Right? Like, is that what you're doing? I could see the confusion really getting there. If you actually look at the Wii U, though, it's a completely different looking console.
It's weird they never, made an effort to show the actual console. This is a completely different thing. But it was also one of those odd things when, because obviously it launched, or it was set to release in the middle of a generation, was again another thing we'll talk about, that a lot of the games, so, going back and looking at the reveal, there was Darksiders, I think it was Darksiders 2 was shown on the reveal stream, and there was not a lot else, there was a lot of kind of concept stuff, so again, there's not a lot of things to differentiate what is this going to do that the current Wii doesn't. Because even, you could play stuff like Darksiders 2 on the Wii, because, you could just get the Pro Controller, for example.
Mm-hmm. The Pro Controller, oh my god. I hated that Pro Controller. That thing was just... I like the design because it is... or at least the stick placement. I prefer the Xbox controller over a Dual Shock or a Dual Sense. So I like the stick placement. I like the Nintendo still sticks with that, but I did not like the Wii U Pro Controller.
So one of the reasons I got you alongside Tucker and Matt is you've actually played on the Wii U. You've had extensive experience with the Wii U. So let's talk about the controller. What is your thought actually in hand of the controller? Because it always looked very kind of Fisher Price.
It feels like
durable durable, but it's not. Nintendo have never made things to actually fit in hand. You just need to look at the NES and even the Switch controllers are pretty uncomfortable.
My Pro Controller is back there. I think the Pro Controller feels pretty good.
The only thing, the Joy-Cons is.
Oh, the Joy-Cons are awful. The Joy-Cons are awful. But yeah, the gamepad itself, the sticks didn't really feel that great. The worst part of it was the touchpad itself.
Yeah.
It was not a very good touchpad. I think you could only hit one thing at a time, right? It didn't have actually multi. I'm pretty sure.
Oh god.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it didn't have multi-touch.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that it didn't have multi-touch. And it was clear that it wasn't. The hardware wasn't there, but the idea of it is really cool because they were using maps and stuff so you can just look here's your map, or here's your inventory, something like that, similar to DS stuff. I really like that for the DS, and they were kind of using it for that. But I think overall in hand, it just didn't. I don't know. It just
Yeah,
wasn't fully
yeah,
there. Wasn't fully realized.
yeah. It never looked never looked comfortable to
No,
me.
it was pretty
Anytime I
bulky.
saw it, yeah, yeah. So actually going on to the release, as I say, 18th of November is when it launched for you in the US, 30th for us here in Europe. I think the main thing, again, will come as when it comes to actually the games that were available when it launched mid-generation, but the pricing I felt was, all over the place. So I've just got some of the price here. So the basic model was $299 or 260, basically £260 here in the UK. And then the premium, which included Nintendo Land, was $349 or £309. There was later released a Zombie U bundle for $389, 350 quid. And I felt this was really weird pricing, especially given, Nintendo are known for releasing much cheaper consoles because they know they have to compete with, Microsoft and Sony, who have got the greater power in the home console space.
Yeah, I would like to. Yeah, you have is it so? This price is here for those two were at time of release for
Yes,
the
yes. So this
for
is so we also
the Xbox
for
and
context
the
for
PlayStation.
the for people watching. I have on a document I prepared. I've also put the price of I found for comparable with the super slim PS3. That was the one with the really horrible plasticky sliding tray, and the Xbox Slim. That was the obviously
A
the
really nice looking
yeah, that really the
360.
glossy one. The one
Yeah.
I forgot actually, but yeah, these were the price I found. And so just to give context to the viewers, the at the time that the Wii U launched, the PS3 Super Slim was $300, so 250 quid. The Xbox was 200. The Xbox 360 Slim was $249, about 200 quid. So there's a massive markup, for an actual powerful games console compared to the Wii U, which already kind of was going to stilt itself, given obviously it was coming off the back of the Wii, which is an ultra popular console, but it was in that kind of part of games history where people are buying it because it was the thing to have, really.
Yeah, for the Wii U to come out underpowered and at parity, at least with PlayStation, and under or over with Xbox, $50 over. It's just like you're already behind.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I mean, we'll probably get to we'll get to the Switch later. I mean, the Switch, I feel it's the same thing for me. It's like it's underpowered for how much you're asking, and it's just like with the Wii U. One of the launch games was I remember being Arkham City Arkham City and Mass Effect 3. You can go play those on 360 for with the cheaper console, a
Yeah,
more
yeah.
powerful console, and the games just run better. Like why would you do that? Why would you play them on the Wii U?
I distinctly remember, walking into my local game shop and seeing, Arkham City on, I think they called it the Armored Edition or something like that, and seeing it on the shelf for Switch. And they had the demo set up, and I was playing it going, this is, because I had the Xbox 360 copy at home, and I was playing it going, this is, graphically, it's a massive downgrade. And just, the part of the thing of, playing, especially the Arkham, because this is the thing that always stuck in my head, is Arkham City, I struggled sometimes with the different gadgets, because they, so many button presses needed at once. With the Switch, I couldn't imagine how you were going to do it because, half your buttons are on two separate sides of the controller.
Yeah, I see. I did not play it. I'm wondering if, like I was mentioned earlier, the maybe everything is on the pad. Because if it is on the pad, like that's I think really interesting. Like I
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
with the DS, I loved how the DS did that with even Pokemon and stuff. Yeah, if you're doing menus and stuff like that it could work that way. It might be easier to do, but the game not running well. Like I'm a frame rate person now,
Yeah, yeah.
so I need the game to run smoothly. I don't
Yeah,
really
yeah.
care if it looks too fidelity, but the Wii U didn't play these games very well.
Yeah, yeah. So what do we make of the launch lineup? So some of the games we
Yeah,
mentioned, obviously, we've got Batman Arkham City Armored Edition. There was also, obviously the big blockbuster stuff. So Assassin's Creed 3, Darksiders 2, the sports games stuff, Mass Effect 3 Special Edition, which is obviously a graphically toned down version of the version that was out on PC, PS3 and 360. And then obviously you've got some actual Nintendo specific stuff like I believe I think was Skylanders a Wii U launch thing. I can't in terms of exclusive. I can't quite
you
remember.
have it. Exclusive? I'm not sure.
I'm trying to remember because I've got distinct memories of it also being on other consoles. But obviously, also stuff like New Super Mario's Bro U and Rabbids Land, and obviously, Zombie U, which was the big thing that Nintendo
Land
kind of really trying to push Wii U using the gamepad and stuff like that. And Zombie U, I think, was the thing they were using to market it.
So it was everywhere.
Yeah. What did you think of the games that it launched with, and kind of, from some of them you might have played, and how they kind of ran compared to their 360, PS3, PC counterparts?
Yeah, it's pretty lackluster. It's a lot of third-party stuff.
Yeah.
Nintendo Land's really the one that I think it's probably the best launch game, other than, I guess, maybe New Super Mario Brothers. But like even New Super Mario Brothers, like maybe it's because we're even 10 years later. That's the style of the new Super Mario Brothers. That look, it's really getting tiring. They kind of need to move on, give Mario a new look now. But like that game's okay. It's not like the best 2D Mario, but it's pretty standard Mario. But Nintendo Land's really the one that sticks out. Zombie U is that's a video game.
Yeah, indeed.
That's all I can really say about that game. But they did push that game a lot.
Yeah. In terms of, I wondered with Nintendo Land, because obviously Nintendo Land it came as part of the premium bundle. That's how they justified the increased price for the black version, was to include Nintendo Land. Obviously, the thing that shifted so many Wiis was the inclusion from day dot of Wii Sports. Because obviously it would make the most of the motion sense technology in the Wii remotes. Obviously, looking back, it's easy to say, in hindsight, to say, what a mistake. But even then, do we remember kind of thinking, Nintendo Land, that's probably going to be the game that's going to show off the Wii U's capabilities the best, and to not include it with the basic package is a bit of an oversight from Nintendo.
Yes, especially with how successful Wii Sports did. We actually, it's funny. So we did not play the Wii U a ton. I didn't buy it, so I didn't own one myself, but my best friend did. And we only played Nintendo Land very little. I actually don't really remember much about it. And most of the launch time, we just bounced back to Wii when we wanted to do Nintendo stuff. We just played Wii Sports and Wii Sports Resort. That's kind of what happened. That's just how unremarkable kind of the early Wii U did.
Mm-hmm. And then, so, we mentioned this a bit earlier, so I think it's time we kind of jump onto it. The big issue with Wii U launching mid-generation, obviously it was 2 years before the Xbox One and PS4 would be released. So, that was at the point where we were starting to get in the very best of, obviously I think GTA was a year away.
Is it 1 year? It wasn't 2013?
Yeah, GT5 was 2013, but I have a feeling the Xbox One and PS4 were 2014.
I want to say I can do some Googling. I want to say it was 2013. Yeah, let me look up Xbox One. Where are you at? I want to say it was the 13th, but even so, November 22nd, 2013.
2013. So it's just a year away from the Xbox One launching, from the PS4 launching, from GTA 5 was a year away. And that's when you start to get, at the end of a console's life cycle, you really get the peak of what that console is able to do. It was such an oversight, I think, from Nintendo to go, we're going to launch, mid to late generation, and ask developers to, on top of finishing projects they're doing for the 360 and the PS3, and ramping up production on what they're doing for the PS4 and the PS4 and the Xbox One, to then go, here's another system we want you to develop for.
Yeah, like Xbox and PlayStation are getting ready to take another step up, and Nintendo's just like, we're here and we're already kind of below you.
Yeah,
and it kind of goes back to the price, right? It's like, well, when those consoles launched, I think Xbox was $500 because they were doing with the Kinect, but still a $400 console, and then PS4 is a $400 console. So it's only $100 more, but it is significantly more powerful. Like, there's no reason to get the Wii U at that point. Yeah. Even for software, like at that time, like Nintendo in 2013, Nintendo still wasn't really hitting that hard with like new software. So like they're just downtrodden, like relying on the 3DS at that point.
Indeed. And even at that point, you know, I think they were just off the back of, you know, having to slash the price of the 3DS to kind of get sales driving because, you know, they'd had such a bad opening gambit for 3DS sales, so it really wasn't the best decision at all for Nintendo to go, we're going to launch the Wii U at, again, a higher price than the 360 and the Xbox, the 360 and the PS3 were launching at, with games that are not on parity with quality that the consoles were currently working with, and then with a, you know, because another thing that kind of really sparks the memory about the Wii U is not just the awful name, not just the fact that all the advertisements focused on the actual gamepad instead of, you know, the stuff you could actually do with it, but it was, you know, such a lack of actual progression from Nintendo. You know, to me, it felt like it could have come, you know, after, you know, was the GameCube. I think the GameCube was the last one before the Wii, wasn't it? So, you know, it feels like it could have been straight off that. You know, the Wii was such a step up in terms of, you know, the way of interacting with games with the motion controllers, and even some of the games you were playing on the Wii were kind of, you could tell there was a definite step up. Wii U always, to me, felt like a bit of a step backwards.
It was a step backwards in a lot of ways. I don't know if I agree with the Wii being a step up, but it definitely a different step for sure. A different way to play, and it got a new audience in. The Wii U did not. The Wii U sent a lot of people to their handheld or just going to a different console.
Yeah. And
which probably helped with the success with the PS4 and stuff.
Quite possibly, because obviously that was the cheaper one at the time. You know, because obviously Xbox had made a massive cavalcade of mistakes. You know, that's a topic for another time.
That's a different video.
Yeah, exactly. But something you and I actually something you brought up to me before we started doing this was that one thing I wanted to mention was the kind of what I saw as the lackluster first party support and first party offerings from Nintendo for the Wii U. Because on top of stuff like, obviously, you know, New Super Mario Bros. U and Nintendo Land, being the two launch games. Also, I remember there being I think Lego City, that was a Wii U exclusive. Obviously not first party, but that's kind of, you know, one of the games that Nintendo tried to push the system on. So how do we think about the actual offering that Nintendo gave towards the Wii U? Because, you know, there's a lot of, you know, Nintendo have all of these well-known properties, but they never felt like they even themselves got behind it. I mean, you know, one of their big system sellers, you know, Zelda, we got a couple of HD remakes and no, you know, new Zelda game for the Wii U.
Yeah, I mean, I guess technically you could say Breath of the Wild. It was supposed to be a Wii U game. It did launch on the Wii U, but yeah, you got Twilight Princess and Wind Waker both at their HDs. But yeah, I pulled up some of their exclusives, just kind of perusing. I mean, they had a few things, some that didn't land. Like I would say, Paper Mario Color Splash didn't land for a lot of Paper Mario fans. But then you have like Xenoblade Chronicles X. I know people really like that game. My favorite, Bayonetta 2.
Okay,
I mean,
come on. Point. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah,
Bayonetta 2. You had Mario Kart. That came out in the same year. Mario Kart 8.
I mean, Mario Kart 8, but I distinctly remember that. I think when that launched, it launched in Japan in 15th in the Japanese sales charts. So
I mean, it definitely
spur the sales that Nintendo would have done. But it's interesting, you know, because even though some of those I forget, you know, obviously I've done some rather extensive research into preparing for this piece, and I forget that, you know, Bayonetta 2 and Xenoblade and, you know, a lot of traditional, you know, Atlas type, for example, JRPG launched on the Wii U. You know, even for example, just sparing my head now, there was that Star Fox Zero, which was, you know, I think by all regards it was another quite, you know, low par offering, but it does technically count as third party support. I think let me clarify. When I say lackluster first offering, I mean lackluster first party offering is kind of real system sellers. As we say, obviously Wii Sports was the proper system seller for the Wii. But then even the sequel to Wii Sports Resort, that was another one. The Zelda games, and Mario Kart were proper system sellers. And I don't think Nintendo really used their iconic licenses to their most while the Wii U was the main console they were developing for.
Yeah, in terms of sales, nothing. In terms of quality, like there are even more here. Like we can't forget like Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, like Hidden Gem. Like people need to play Captain Toad Treasure Tracker if you can even play it on Switch. Just play it there if you want. Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze. A lot of games that people kind of even associate with the Switch. They were Wii U games.
Yeah.
They just had to re-release them. What else? I had another one here. The Mario Party. I thought the Mario Party's in the Wii U. It was 10. I thought that was fun.
Yeah. I guess
it's definitely not my favorite. I mean, it's not.
I wonder
not
though
like
with stuff like Mario Parties, that's when I feel that that's when Nintendo were kind of going all in on the amiibo craze. So
I got a lot. You can't see them. A lot of them.
So that's when they were trying to I distinctly remember that there was an Animal Crossing board game title they released, and you had to have one amiibo per player, and that's given how scarce those were, that's you're asking people to put in a lot of effort just to play a single party game.
Yeah, definitely. The one game that really was a system seller for us, which we have yet to really even talk about, Smash 4. Smash for the Wii U. That was the game, the game we played. That was our Wii U game. That was our party game we played. That's honestly, I think, one of the best feeling Smash games. I know that might be a hot take. I don't know. I think the game feels so good to play. We really didn't play a ton of anything else on the Wii U. That we kept that console around and didn't sell it just to play that. We even got the adapter where you can hook up I think 2 of them, and you can have all GameCube controllers. And with Smash 4 you can go up to 8 players, and we were just that was the game.
So I guess I can see that the loss of first party support. I think as you say, as the brain starts start to remember a lot of these. As I say, they did put a fair amount of support in, but I guess that also goes hand in hand with, for example, I think there was Pokken Tournament. I think was the only Pokemon game released on there.
I remember that game.
But they, other than that, that's when they were still pulling all of their Pokemon games onto the 3DS, and I think that maybe that was a bit of a misjudged move by Nintendo not to put, when you've got a console that's not selling gangbusters, maybe put in an actual normal Pokemon game on there. It can take advantage of all the new bells and whistles that the Wii U controller brings. And
still waiting for that, to be honest.
Yeah, very, very true. The Switch Pokemon games haven't really done a lot more than just copy the 3DS
hopefully
ones.
Scarlet and Violet, but I don't have too much. I'm gonna like it because it's Pokemon, but
I mean, to be fair, Legends Arceus is a distinct departure from the Pokemon.
I like Arceus.
Formula, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think another thing that, again, we're talking about the games at this point. The other thing that really kind of shot the Wii U in the foot was around 2013, as we say, in the lead up to the Xbox One and the PS4 launching, and also some proper blockbusters like, again, GTA 5. It was around kind of beginning of summer when Nintendo started to lose a massive amount of third party support, which is, what I think killed them. It killed the system so badly. So, as we said earlier, a majority of the third-party games released on the Switch were lesser versions of PC, PS3, and Xbox 360 titles, and it got to a point where in May 2013, so this is 6 to 8 months after the system released to the public, EA reduced support for the Wii U and noted that no games were in development for the system. Then at E3, a month later, Ubisoft stated that they had no more games in development for the Wii, no more exclusives, I should say, in development for the Wii U, and that it would not increase that, it would not improve that, unless Wii U sales increased, which obviously we know from history they didn't. And then the final one was July of 2013. Bethesda announced that they had no Wii U games in development.
And Bethesda, they always help support. I mean, they really one of the biggest supporters of the Switch for a while there. Yeah, when you get Ubisoft, that's the one. Ubisoft will put things on a toaster.
Yeah.
If Ubisoft isn't putting it on the Wii U, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Like that's not good.
Because obviously, as we said earlier, Zombie U was a Ubisoft title. That's the game that was kind of most thought about when you thought of the Wii U. And then the fact that Ubisoft gone, actually, we're not going to do any more exclusives for this. We're still going to support it a little bit, but unless we see sales increase, they're not going to do it. And that really shot the Wii U in the foot, really. And that kind of led to drastic steps being taken by Nintendo. In September, so the 20th of September, to coincide with the release of Wind Waker HD, Nintendo announced that a $50 price cut would be coming to the Wii U. And, so this was, obviously at that point, that was another major Nintendo franchise set to be released on that date, and Nintendo were so worried about the Wii U's sales. They've gone $50 price cut. Is that going to work? But even then, I think that only brings it, as we noted with our previous numbers, that only brings it in line with what the Xbox 360 Slim was selling for at that time. You could have got a PS3 for very similar price.
Yeah. They needed to even cut it more, but Nintendo's not going to do that. That's just too much for them. They're very stringent with their money, so they're not going to do that. And they had a life raft with the 3DS.
Yeah.
Even at that time, it probably wasn't selling too well, but it will keep going for years. So the 3DS was just their life raft. They were drowning, and that price cut just wasn't enough.
Yeah. So obviously, another thing that I want to talk about in terms of, obviously, so we've talked about the sales problems that it had, and trust me, there's more to come in terms of that. Another factor that this was especially impactful to me because as someone who is interested in video games, likes that I had a 360, I've got a PS4, an Xbox One, I've even got a Wii somewhere in storage, but the Wii U never really kind of attracted to me, and part of that was Nintendo's real lack of online offerings. This was the time, especially the PS3 and Xbox 360 time, where multiplayer games was had this surge in popularity. And Nintendo just refused really to get on board. You can speak this better than I can, Dan. That Nintendo's online offerings were, still to this day, are a bit of a shambles.
It infuriates me. It infuriates me. The Switch doesn't have, they did it with the new one, which is good, the OLED, but the Switch doesn't even have an Ethernet port in the dock. My original Xbox did.
Yeah.
2001. Nintendo, what are you doing? I don't understand. But their online sucks. It's garbage. I can't even play. You can't. The fact that you couldn't even play Smash even back then would have been great, or Mario Kart back then would have been great. That's how you get people to. Oh, you want to play Mario Kart? Oh, yeah, let's play it, and you could just play it online. That would have helped. Maybe people would want to buy the Wii U. Yeah. It's cheap. But, or I don't even remember. Did the Wii U, do you know if that had some sort of Ethernet port? I don't think it did.
I have a feeling it might have done. Obviously there was a whole array of, because I think at that time they were still supporting, I think, SCART. There was a version of SCART in the back of the Wii U, as well as, I think, obviously HDMI. And I think there might have been an Ethernet port, but apart from that,
I can't remember.
It was very limited. I mean, even we look at stuff like that. This is a very basic thing, and it's a thing that kind of, I think, to the start of the PS3's lifespan, kind of hindered Sony, was the lack of, even to this day, the lack of true community features, like a party chat, like friends list, and all these other factors. You know,
well, don't you have a phone? Don't you want to download the app and put your thing? I don't know. What is
use some mad bit of plastic that Nintendo want to sell you for $10 for some reason?
Ridiculous.
It's especially with a system that, you know, one of the big selling points they had was that someone wants to, you know, use the big telly. You can disconnect the you can take the Wii U gamepad into another room. Why is there not an ability to, you know, play on, you know, multiplayer games with your friends? And to do that, inherently Nintendo, you have to chat to people. So it's something they've always refused to do. And the other thing is the Virtual Console. So obviously, Virtual Console is something that Nintendo have sporadically supported. I think per month, you know, through the lifespan of the Wii U, they would release kind of 2 to 3, maybe 4 games if you're lucky on Virtual Console, and they'd be a variety, and you'd actually get a distinct kind of lacking quality depending on regions. There was, you know, Japan obviously got the better games on the Virtual Console than the US or Europe. In terms of the Virtual Console from the Wii U specifically, we'll talk about the Virtual Console going forward for the Switch later. Your thoughts on the Wii U's Virtual Console, Dan?
I actually didn't do too many of that. My friend, because I didn't own it, my friend, he bought some games, so I played a few just to try. But I generally like their Virtual Console stuff. It is just a good way to play old games. I didn't like that the not carrying over stuff, having to rebuy things.
Yeah,
that's just Nintendo just has weird choices all the time. But I actually don't have too much history with playing the older games.
Okay. It's certainly one of those things I distinctly have a distinct memory that the Virtual Console, as I say, that, you know, Japan obviously get better games than the West would. So obviously, the other thing I want to go back to the sales, because this has to be talked about, you know. So obviously, leading into the Wii U, the Wii had sold 101.6 million consoles. It was obviously the runaway winner in the generation of the Wii, the 360, and the PS3, with the PS3 and the Wii and the 360 a lot closer. Obviously, you know, there's things of the 360 was better in the to start with, and then obviously Sony caught up. But regardless, the Wii was the outright winner of that. As of December 2019, these are the nearest or the earliest numbers I can get in terms of, you know, numbers to our date. The Wii U has sold 13.56 million consoles. Now, not only is that abysmal, not only had the Wii U sold less at the same point that the Dreamcast was killed off, but doing a little bit of further research, I found quite a funny thing to me as an owner of this system. The Vita, which had a kind of, you know, it had a year head start, but the Vita, which is roundly known as not a popular console, sold 16 million units.
Good for the Vita.
My fault, exactly.
Good for the Vita.
Yeah. Vita. Underappreciated, even if the second gen version is a horrible downgrade on the original. But, you know, those numbers. Dan, talk to me about, you know, any other theories you've got as to why the Wii U failed so hard than obviously the ones we've talked about, because that is quite the drop off.
Well, the why is interesting. If you look at the history of Nintendo's main home consoles, it's a very down trajectory.
Yeah.
They've only really sold worse and worse and worse and worse. Yeah. Their handhelds have really gotten better, and they constantly are selling great. The Wii was really the only outlier, and that probably is because they really hit home with the family.
Yeah.
And there's just more of them than hardcore gamers. It just is.
Yeah.
So they hit with an audience, and people wanted the Wii. Probably didn't buy a lot of games with the Wii, but they wanted to play the Wii. The Wii U just wasn't there, you know, like it didn't have the Wii sportsification of culture. It didn't have that moment, so it wasn't going to sell.
And it's one of those. Go on.
I was just going to say with the Switch, like they're only really seeing a lot of success with the Switches because they're not making a new handheld. They're getting the handheld audience. That is who's really helping the Switch. They're getting two audiences just to buy one console. So
it's interesting you bring that up. When we're talking about the Wii U's legacy, do we think that the Wii U was a good idea? It was an idea ahead of its time, or just kind of do we feel that it was the wrong time for this kind of this idea of the handheld, or that kind of thing? What would you think?
That's an interesting question. The Wii ultimately feels necessary for the Switch to even live.
Yeah, very true.
Like the Wii U, it died out back just so the Switch could succeed. Like the idea of actually taking that in the handheld and moving it around, being able to use that off of the TV, like you were saying, go walk. I forget how the actual distance, but you can go at least to another room and play. Like they really liked that idea and they wanted to expand on that. I don't know. Maybe Nintendo would have got there without the Wii U. I'm not sure, but they like that. And the Switch is just a actually full realized version of that. Yeah. But you can't play on the TV with holding it, which I think is, a little bit of a difference there.
Yeah. And in terms of, you mentioned the 3DS earlier, that kind of Nintendo kind of cannibalized the Wii U sales by also having a handheld console at the same time. Do we think that that was kind of a significant a hit for the Wii U, as it, obviously there's a reason that Nintendo haven't continued to release 3DSs with the Switch. So do you think that they realized their mistake, or is it a case of you think in Nintendo's mind they've gone, right, the Wii U failed, the DS concept is kind of at the end of its lifespan, let's kind of do a bit of a mashup of the two?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that was that time period was very close, wasn't it?
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, it wasn't like, what's the name of that Metroid game? Samus Returns. Wasn't that the same year that the Switch launched?
Yeah, so Switch launched 2017, and the Wii U, if I recall, wasn't killed off until 2019. I want to say.
I mean, Samus Returns for the 3DS. Yes. Wasn't that in the same year? Wasn't that 2017? I'm pretty sure.
I believe it might have been, yeah.
And so that's like running right there. Like that might have been the last year they really did major 3DS games.
So just to correct myself, I was incorrect. So yeah, the Wii U was killed off in 2017. January 31st is when they officially discontinued it. Which obviously lines up with that's when they went, we're going to release a Switch now. In I think March they did that. But you're right, there was certainly a bit of crossover with those games. We mentioned it earlier. Breath of the Wild, it was initially developed as a Wii U game, and it did end up coming out for both consoles.
Yeah, it was right there. I've never played that Wii U version. I've actually never looked at that Wii U version. I want to know how that runs. I wonder if it runs okay.
It probably wouldn't be great.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't be great. But I mean, that game's not too intensive. I don't know. Maybe the Wii U could surprise me.
Potentially.
But yeah, once the Switch started going, I'm sure that they took their foot off the gas for the 3DS. Like they did not want anything else. They just wanted people to buy this one console. It's even now so with the Switch, like they introduced a more handheld version, and they're still calling it the Switch. It's just the Switch Lite. It's like that thing can't even be docked, which I think is a very weird choice. I think that they should maybe think about trying to get a way to dock it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Go
ahead. Okay. No, please.
So obviously this whole piece for the most part has been rather negative on the Wii U because it's one of the worst performing consoles of all time. But
I love the software.
Yeah, let's have a look at the kind of some of the positives for a moment. So, as someone, as you say, you didn't own one directly, but you did play, a reasonable amount. What was, I think I have a feeling of what the answer is going to be. But what would you say was the best game that you experienced on the Wii U?
Oh, I mean, I did talk about Smash. I mean, if in terms of time, it has to be Smash 4.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I played anything more than Smash 4. If you want me to like try to take a step back and what's objectively the best Wii U game, that's a good
you
question.
can do it. It's more for because obviously I think you've also played some of the Wii U games on the Switch.
Yes.
To date. So could be a case of you've gone, actually this was actually quite a good game. I just didn't end up experiencing it on the Wii U.
If you want one for that, the big one I already mentioned is Captain Toad Treasure Tracker.
Yeah.
That game got completely buried. That game's fantastic. The game is a gem. I am glad Nintendo made that game. But if I had to make a definitive answer, it's Bayonetta 2. Come on.
Yeah.
Best game on that console.
Just the same, as we said, it just got buried by the console's lack of sales. In terms of this is again, it's a bit trickier for you than it is going to be for Tucker and Matt when we speak to them momentarily. What would you say is kind of was the best aspect of the Wii U from a standpoint of whether it be the I was going for example the controller. I know it's not for you, but theoretically this aspect of the controller was actually quite good, for example.
Best aspect of the Wii U. Can I just say amiibos? The introduction of amiibos. I love the amiibos. They're great. I have so many of them. And my best friend, I live with him. The entire she has an entire shelf. He has like triple the amount I do. He has so many amiibos. I love the amiibos. But the actual console itself, I don't know. The design's okay. Yeah. I kind of like the design better than anything Sony makes.
Yeah.
Other than PS4 is okay, but the PS5 is just an absurd, behemoth, ridiculous. Like I think the design for the Wii U's generally pretty good. I don't really like the design of the hardware for the gamepad, but I think their console hardware is okay.
Yeah, it's quite interesting actually thinking about it with amiibos because obviously as a concept they're quite nice. They're quite nice models. I mean, I've got some of the Disney Infinity figures just behind me because they're nice models to have. I've never played the game. They're just nice models to have. But the thing that always got me about the amiibos was not only the scarcity, because Nintendo actively went out of their way to stop you buying some of them, but I did kind of like that you could use them in multiple games, like Skylanders, for example, or I think there might have been an integration for Mario Kart. You could scan an amiibo through and then play as that character. That's a very nice inclusion, just to spice up the different characters that people are playing with.
I think Smash had it too, didn't they? Wasn't there something like you can I think you could scan an amiibo and it like you can have them fight each other or something. It was like a particular version and it would save it on the amiibo or something. It was something weird with Smash. I remember the amiibo interactivity is great. I mean, even into the Switch, I feel like they're not doing it as much now, but when Breath of the Wild came out, being able to summon things, with all the links I have and stuff, so good. I love amiibos.
And unfortunately, we've got to go back to the negative side. What would you say is on the flip side of the best? What about the worst aspect, you think? Is it that controller, or is there something even worse of the Wii U that kind of sticks in your craw?
I don't think I could say it's the controller because I like the idea.
Okay.
I think more of it's just the hardware isn't there.
Yeah,
it's just not there. But the idea I think is pretty cool. What is the worst aspect of the Wii U? It's pretty obvious, I think. The name.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Yeah.
It's trash. Even the Wii. I'm going to be honest. The Wii's a bad name too. It's a bad name. I don't like it.
It's not great. That is the elephant that we haven't really properly addressed. Is the awful name of it. I mean, as we say, it's such a bad name for the console. As you say, I sort of disagree that I think Wii is kind of acceptable. It's different enough from everything else that is on the market, but they tend to follow it up with the Wii U, or anything with the previous console and then a letter is a bad. There's a reason why Sony and mobile manufacturers go with numbers, because there is a distinct change between each phone. Nintendo's decision to just go, well, just call it the Wii U. I'd like to know what focus group came up with that. Much like
I'm not called
the same focus group that came up with Xbox One.
Yeah, I mean, well, Xbox One's just, I don't know. The one, I think it's supposed to be like the one device for everything or whatever. Stupid.
I mean,
they should just call it the Wii 2. I mean, that could have been better. Even though I don't really like the Wii name, but I mean, that's at least, hey, this is the second one, right? Yeah,
it's certainly. I get it, but I do think, from a, seeing with 2020 hindsight, I know that, for example, obviously, Microsoft were going to call the 360 the 2, but when actually that makes our console look awful as compared to the PS3. So from that aspect, I can understand it, why they didn't call it the Wii 2, but at the same time, I think you're right in the sense of, even just putting a number to differentiate it from, this was the motion control thing, this is the new thing that we want you to go out and buy.
Yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily even agree with what Xbox did. Just call it Xbox 2. Who cares? Who cares if they're on 3? It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't make theirs better. Whatever. I mean, the Xbox just has a history of weird names. They always have. Yeah. Nintendo's different. Yeah. Xbox is just.
That's again another topic for another time about Microsoft naming protocols. But going forward with, obviously, we're looking now. We've got the Switch. The Switch is 5 years old at this point.
Yeah, almost 6.
No, it is. We're coming up on 6 years now of the Nintendo Switch. How do you think because obviously the gamepad look is probably the main influence behind the Switch in terms of how they went from the Wii U to the Switch. Do you think there's any others, like perhaps the focus on, as you say, they didn't fully explore the use of the second screen on the Wii U. Maybe Nintendo thought, maybe we can make a use, to go from the handheld mode of the Switch to the home console version, and it's that kind of device evolution almost from Nintendo.
Yeah, I think what makes the Switch work is how easy it works.
Yeah, that's probably better.
Like taking it, if taking it from handheld and playing whatever you're playing, and actually just putting it in the dock and how quick that works, I think it really helps the Switch. If there was a little bit more of a delay, I think I think people would be pretty upset.
Yeah.
Like but it's pretty quick. But yeah, they pretty much took the exact design. It's just thinner, it's
but less Fisher Price and more kind of an actual piece of technology.
Yeah, less Fisher Price, exactly. And the screen still isn't great in the Switch. I think that they need a better pad. Like my iPad here just has a better screen.
Yeah,
why?
Yeah.
Like I know. Well, I guess I shouldn't compare Apple because Apple does have very high quality screens. They always have, but like Nintendo invest a little bit.
Yeah.
But they don't want to take a loss on any console they ever make. They want, even if they're only profiting $10, they want to profit $10.
Yeah.
They do not want to take a loss, unlike their competitors who do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's an interesting point because you're right. Just thinking back to even my time owning a DS, the screens on those things, the actual touchscreen is awful.
It worked pretty well.
It did work quite well, but it's still, as you say, it's that kind of resistive touchscreen that there's a reason you've got to use a stylus, and I think they have improved in the point where where you can just use finger movements on the Switch screen to get it to work, but there's still a bit of, as you say, kind of. It's not as good as mobile phone screens, which is kind of the level that Nintendo should be meeting with. Obviously, it's not as premium a product because the Switch is almost 5 times cheaper than a new mobile phone. But the point is still there that these good touchscreens aren't that much more expensive, and Nintendo should be incorporating them. I think the OLED has a better screen, but there's still a ways to go in terms of actually to a par where it's on the level with modern technology.
Yeah, I'd like to go to a Walmart and buy a $300 phone and just compare that touchscreen.
Yeah.
Because I want to say it might be better. I don't know. I'd have to try it.
Yeah, it's very possible. So obviously, we're talking about the Switch now. Obviously, we've mentioned a lot of the things that Nintendo really screwed the pooch with, to use one of my favorite childhood phrases. With the Wii U, how do we think they're doing with the Switch? How do you think they fully recovered from the disaster that was the Wii U?
Ooh, fully recover. I mean, in sales wise, yeah, Nintendo's not looking back.
Yeah,
they're gone. I think they've been gone. I think honestly, probably since 2017.
Yeah.
That year was very big for them.
Yeah, I mean they surpassed the Switch as of, I think it was the beginning of this month. The Switch has sold sold definitely 100 million more units than the Wii U did. So on that front, you're right there. They are, they've absolutely blown past it. But in terms of the actual, the way they incorporate different online services and stuff, do you think they've still kind of, there's a ways to go still for Nintendo?
Oh, I'm just gonna say it. They need to stop making hardware. I just want to play the games. But if I could play their games on, I don't know, my Xbox, I wouldn't even think twice.
Yeah.
I would just, I don't like their hardware generally.
Okay, yeah.
I like their handhelds. I think that's really been but that's also younger me. Like their handhelds. I liked my DS and my Game Boy Advance, but I don't know. I don't really think that they're great at hardware. I think they have really cool hardware ideas.
Yeah.
And even like we talked about, it came from the Wii U, right? I think it's a pretty cool idea, but it just wasn't there. And I'm sure people aren't going to like me saying that the Switch isn't great, but I don't think it's great. It could be better.
Yeah.
But they don't want to charge more, and they don't want to put more money into it. So it's just it is what it is. And we're seeing all of these games, releasing now. Like one of my favorite games this year, Bayonetta 3. Like the game shouldn't look like that. Platinum's getting the best that they can out of the Bayonetta 3, but like the Switch just can't do it, and it sucks.
And it's interesting, especially with Platinum, because Bayonetta 3 is exclusive to the Switch. With something like obviously Witcher. I think Witcher runs fairly well on Switch, but there's still graphically, if you want the graphical improvements, you go and play the 360 version, the PC version, the PS4 version. But as you said, there is still a marked difference between the because unfortunately, as much as maybe we'd like it not to be that way, graphics are still the way that games are judged from the get-go. Obviously gameplay comes along with, the quality, as you say, Bayonetta 3, Mario Odyssey is a very good game, but graphics are always the way that games will be perceived from the jump, because that's how they're obviously marketed. And there is still a marked difference between the PCs and the main home consoles now and what Nintendo's offerings are.
Yeah, I don't necessarily completely agree with like the graphical thing. I think for the most part, yes, I agree. But like, I think that's mostly for like the masses. Yeah. They see a game that looks great, like that's what blows them away. For us that play a lot more games, I think if there's a little bit more nuance there, you're gonna want something
of course,
to play well, something like I want frames. Give me the frame. I want 1,000 frames a second. I don't care if your game's 4K or not.
Yeah.
Nintendo, they need to put some juice behind their console. They really want to commit. Nintendo needs to commit. It just feels like they're never fully commit to the actual hardware.
Yeah. And what would you say in terms of, because this is something that was mentioned by our friend Tucker and Abram on the Backlog Banter. They talked about the N64, and it really struck with me that Nintendo has, for such a long time relied on its home names, like obviously Animal Crossing. We had a story recently that it's estimated by the sales figures that 35% of Switch owners now have a copy of Animal Crossing. So that's obviously that's of such a large percentage.
I think it's 40 million or something like that.
Yeah, 40 million worldwide. Do we think that it's still a bit of a problem for Nintendo that so much of their sales and marketing stuff is based off nostalgia, like you and I have, for their DSs and all their kind of older home consoles, but also for their franchises that, we mentioned it at the beginning. Pokemon, they didn't put a Pokemon game on Wii U up until what was it? Obviously, you've had on the Wii U, you've had Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. You had the I can't remember the name of the one that followed. It was like set in like a Pokemon England kind of thing.
England?
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it.
Was it a side game?
No, it was one of the main ones. Sword and Shield, that was it. That was the one.
Sword and Shield.
Yeah,
sure.
And then we had obviously Diamond and Pearl basically remastered, and we've got Scarlet and Violet coming out. And obviously, as we said, the only real difference from the Pokemon formula that Nintendo have had with the Switch, or for the home consoles, has been Pokemon Arceus, and obviously Snap, because that's just bringing an N64 game to that people have been asking for the past decade and a half to the Switch. Do you think that's still a massive problem for them? They rely too much on their homegrown name, their well-worn names. Obviously, you haven't mentioned Mario yet.
Yeah, you can't forget Mario. That's a tough question because they put out a lot of first-party games, and even on the Switch, they're putting out a lot of first-party games.
Yeah.
Some of them are like kind of just bare bones, and like I've wanted to play these sports games. They put out 3 sports games that I've wanted, and they're all pretty bare bones, and I don't really want to play a bare bones sports game. Like, I think that they need third-party support if they want to get to the mass audience, because the mass audience, they want to play Madden, FIFA, Call of Duty, even Assassin's Creed. Like, these are the games people want to play. Genshin Impact, then you're going to start getting into the free to play. Obviously, you can play Fortnite, but it's probably not the best version, but you could play it.
But
what about Apex?
It's a way to get people actually, people playing on the console. If you've got free to play games, they can just jump into.
Yeah, but you need good online as well. Come on, Nintendo.
Yeah, indeed.
But they need to get, if they want to get these people, then they need third-party support. They do have really good first-party games, but look at the Wii U. They've had a lot of great first-party games. It didn't sell well. So it's clear that you can't just have first-party games.
Yeah.
The reason we've said it, the reason why the Switch is doing so well is the handheld audience. They're helping them. I think if this was only a home console, it wouldn't have succeeded as well. But they ultimately, I think that they need third-party support for the next one.
Yeah.
I don't really know if they're sticking with this hybrid model, they might not care.
Yeah. All I ask is that Nintendo, please stop slapping Mario's name on things like Mario Golf, Mario Party, Mario, tennis.
My boy can do everything.
It's like
he's a plumber.
You've got other characters. It's like, I get Mario's your poster boy, but you've got other things you can use. Stop having.
What do you want? You want like Link golfing? Yeah, throw Link in there. You know what? Yeah.
I mean, just do even if it's something small like Smash Brothers Golf or something like that.
Ooh, so like Nintendo Kart.
Yeah.
Or Nintendo Golf. Is that what you want? You want then Donkey Kong could be, doing whatever, and Link, and then have everyone, right? Samus with her suit. That'd be cool. I'd be down for that. But I'm cool with Mario being on everything. Let him do all of it. Like Mario plus Rabbids. Are you kidding me? I hate the Rabbids. The new one I can actually play without the Rabbids, which is amazing. But let Mario be in a top-down RPG. That sounds awesome. Throw Mario in everything. Let Mario be the next. Let him take Captain Price's role in Call of Duty and let him be with a gun shooting an M16. That's what I want Mario to be. Everything voiced by Chris Pratt too, of course.
So you're saying instead of putting the Smash Bros. Characters and everything, you just put we'll have the new Metroid game is going to be starring Mario.
Yes, exactly. Is it the new Zelda? It's just going to be Mario. That's why they haven't showed much Tears of the Kingdom, because Mario is really the main character.
I mean, we joke, but we haven't seen. I don't think, at least, we've seen a Paper Mario game on Switch. So they're
there was the Origami King, or what was that called? Origami King. Is that what it was called?
Origami King?
Yeah, I think that's what it's called. Origami something.
I didn't think there was one on the.
Yeah, it didn't really. It reviewed okay. I think it's called Origami King. It had like a paper. It was like a paper mache, game. Yeah. There definitely was one.
Nice.
I remember seeing it.
There's too many Mario games for me to remember they all exist.
Yeah, I didn't play it, but I'm pretty sure there was one on the Switch.
Yeah. So Dan, thank you so much for joining me. Any closing thoughts on the Wii U as we wrap up with you here?
Yeah, ultimately, I will say the console wasn't a complete failure. I think that if it wasn't for that, then the Switch wouldn't exist. And I do like the Switch. I like more of the games than the Switch itself, but kind of happy the Wii U died so the Switch could live.
Yeah. I think that's as you say, that's the one good thing that one main thing I should say that the Wii U did right is that it kind of set us all up for the Nintendo Switch, and the Switch is, as we said, there are still problems with the Switch, but it's certainly a step up, and Nintendo are obviously back to what they were, and they're a key player in the home console market, because obviously look at the Wii U was 13 odd million sold, and then you had the Xbox and the PlayStation on around about a minimum of 80 million units. So
yeah, significant difference.
Yeah, it was significant. But thank you very much, Dan. I think it's now time we hear from Matt and Tucker. So now I'm joined by Tucker and Matt. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to me, gentlemen.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
No worries.
So I want to start with, what were our first impressions of the Wii U when we first saw it? Of course, E3 2011 was when Nintendo unveiled it. What was our first impressions of it, if we remember what it were?
That was not something that I was personally cognizant of.
Okay.
I had not been someone who followed game news or game reveals or E3 of anything that nature until probably I'd say around 2015 or 2016. So
Yeah.
I was obviously Wii U generation was well into its almost heyday at that point. So that's not something I was there for.
Matt, what about you?
I did actually. I think I did see it when it was announced there. And I remember for the longest time thinking that it was more akin to what the Switch is now.
Mm-hmm.
And that it was a console that could be played at home on your, main TV. And then also, take it on the bus.
Yeah.
That's how I had it in my head. Pretty much right up until I was, buying one at a shop almost.
So it's something that really sticks in my mind about it is that I went back and in preparation watched the E3 2011 reveal, and the entire thing, they don't actually show the console, it's just the actual handheld, and that continued through the marketing. So it's obviously started getting the gears rolling in people's heads of this must just be, especially with the name, which is another thing we'll touch on. This must just be an accessory for the Wii. So Matt, how soon after it came out did you get it?
It must have been. I must have been one of the first fools lined up for it.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I don't think day of, but easily first release week.
Yeah.
I must have been straight on it. It was sort of a. Yeah. I sort of knew that it wasn't as brand new a console as it could be, but I also didn't fall into the pitfall that I think a lot of people that didn't pick it up did, which of thinking it was just a slightly better version of the Wii.
Yeah.
I knew that I needed it to play what I thought was going to be the next generation of Nintendo games.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about a minute, lads, about the hardware. Because, of course, that actual controller, it's basically, as I said moments ago with Dan, it's like a Fisher-Price thing. It's so, it feels so cheap. It looks like it's, built to last. Tucker's got one right there.
Like a lot of prop comedy.
Indeed. We do love a bit of prop comedy. So, how do we feel about the actual feel of the device? Because, obviously, Nintendo things, they're usually built to last. We look at the DSs and such. Tucker, we'll start with you.
I think my biggest problem with it isn't how it feels in terms of it being cheap or not, because frankly, when you think about the build quality and feel of many of the other Nintendo controllers, like the N64 controller or even the Wiimote, and Nunchuck, which were my real first exposure to holding and using controllers for a long time. Those don't feel super solidly well made either, and even other controllers around this time. I'd say the Xbox 360 controller, notwithstanding, the PS3 controller is a piece of plastic crap as well. So it doesn't really bother me that it's a little bit lighter, it's a little bit flimsier. It doesn't quite feel as dense and sturdy as something like, say, the DualSense or the Xbox One controller, even the Switch Pro controller. But my biggest problem with it is just that it's glossy. Yeah. This is one of the few controllers that has a glossy finish. And not only that, as you can see from the one I have, it's black. And the way that picks up dust and fingerprints drives me bonkers. And it's part of the reason that I never really got into using the Wii U, is because as someone who is always polishing off my computer screen or my phone screen because I don't like there being the fingerprints and dust everywhere, this thing just attracts that like a magnet. Yeah. And frankly, if it had a matte finish like the Xbox 360 controller or something, I think I would like this controller way more. It's a nitpick, to be 100% honest, but it's something that really frustrates me about it.
And Matt, what about you?
Well, I dug mine up just before the podcast, and you were there, sort of on the sidelines, and you heard. I pretty much had an existential crisis because
it was a proper existential crisis.
Yeah, I forgot everything about it. Like Tucker said, it feels incredibly light.
Yeah.
For something that is so
huge. It's probably the biggest game controller I've ever used.
Oh, easily, yeah. And it, like you say, with the glossy finish, it feels sort of strange. I've got mine here from years ago, sort of untouched, how I left it. And it's I've put some sort of like protective case over it, so I've got like a rubbery touch. And I think I almost had to do that to make it feel just a bit more like nice to hold.
Sure.
I was looking at all the different elements for it, and I completely forgot it has a stylus.
It does, at the top.
I pulled out the stylus, and I was like, I thought this was like a DS fever dream I was having. It just the whole thing shocked me.
You had one big stylus and then two small DS ones at the side that you've been using. You didn't realise there was one at the top.
Yeah, I pulled out. I've got a protective case that it was zipped up in, and there's like a screen wipe thing in there, and multiple different styluses. I didn't even know about the one inside the console.
Yeah.
Really? So had you been using that gamepad for years straight without using the built-in stylus?
I think so. I think I had a much larger one, and I used to sit there and think, this is upsettingly big. And that was just entirely my fault of just like not having the knowledge of what there was. I think I absolutely found it eventually.
Yeah.
But by then I was so used to just using this other one that I was like,
yeah, sure.
I've realized I've gone, Matt.
Oh, sorry, and just another thing I noticed is that I tried using the internally built-in one, and it is, like I said, it almost reminds me of a DS stylus. It's so small.
Oh, it's basically identical. It's about, I would say, like 1.3 times bigger than a DS stylus. But it absolutely does not fit inside a DS.
Oh yeah, no. But even that, if you're holding the console with two hands and you're trying to use the stylus in your right or your left hand, you can't reach the other end of the touchscreen.
You're right, yeah.
So I had this big cumbersome pen, but it was the only way to do it and it be comfortable and not have to sort of crane my neck and back. Swapping between the touchscreen and the actual, like, your home screen. So I invented a solution for myself. But it's still mind-boggling to me.
Yeah. So I realised I didn't ask you, Tucker, how long after the Wii U came out did you pick one up?
Well, I have a very specific memory of getting the Wii U, and it was for Smash for Wii U.
Yeah.
And it was specifically right before they stopped giving away Mewtwo as a promotion.
Oh, okay.
For a cross-buy promotion, because if you remember, if you bought Smash 3DS at launch, you were given a code to get Mewtwo on both versions when Smash 4 came out, and our Smash for Wii U came out. And so I got 3DS version at launch, and I played that. And it wasn't until Easter of 2015 that I picked up a Wii U along with Smash 4 and was able to, just under the wire, get Mewtwo along in Smash 4. But so obviously most of the way through the Wii U's life cycle at that point.
So another thing I wanted to touch on, gentlemen, obviously Matt got one not that far after release, and Tucker, you a little bit after that. The pricing I felt was massively kind of a bit of an oversight, I think, from Nintendo. So as I said with Dan, I've got some notes for size. I'm just going to refer to those. So the basic pack cost $299, so £260 basically for me and Matt. Then the black version, so the premium version, which came with Nintendo Land, cost $349 or basically £310. Nintendo would then go on to sell a bundle for Zombie U when that released on the 17th of February, which cost $389, £350. And this pricing, I think, is really, really interesting because at the time, Sony had not that recently, I think about 2 months before, had brought out their PS3 Super Slim. That was the one with the really horrible plastic tray.
Yes. That's the one that I have.
Yeah, that released
George Foreman grill.
Yeah, exactly. That released at $300, so £250. So that's already, that's about in line with what you're paying for a Wii U. And then the Xbox Slim. So this was the glossy black one, the one I've actually got, which is at least I think the best 360 there is, because the kind of one after that, which they used to try to imitate the Xbox One, is not very good. That was at the time $250, around £200. So Nintendo had really, especially, we were very close to the release of the Xbox One and the PS5, or sorry, the PS4, excuse me. It's a really weird decision from Nintendo to go, we're going to launch this console that at launch we know, and this is another thing we'll talk about, is underpowered compared to the PS3 and the Xbox 360. We're going to launch it at a price that is higher than what is already out for those two consoles.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would say it makes a little bit of sense to me, though. Okay. I feel like it would devalue the console even more if it launched lower than the price of consoles that had been out on their third or fourth iterations at that point. So that price being comparable is actually kind of surprising. When you think of the price that the PS3 launched at, or you think of the price that the Xbox Series X and the PS5 launched at, those are leagues more expensive than you're paying for the Xbox One S or X or the PS4 Slim or even a Switch at that time. So most consoles, when they come out, are a lot more than what you currently have available for new market prices. So it being comparable is actually a little bit surprising to me, though I wasn't buying that console at launch. So I think Matt can probably speak a little more authoritatively to that price comparison.
Well, like I said, I picked it up sort of easily first couple of weeks, and I looked at the price, and I remember not having any sort of issue with it, because at the time I thought, like I said earlier, I thought that was my gateway into the next generation of Nintendo games. And I remember every console I had from Nintendo up until then, it had done the rounds. It earned its keep. Easily. So I sort of, I didn't bat an eyelid at the price. It's only now, looking at my collection of like 6 games, have I lived to regret that. But at the time, I was more than happy with it.
So I also want to note one thing. I've wanted to touch on the hardware as well. And this is something we'll come back to, I think, when we'll go to talk about the Switch. Is that touchscreen? I remember trying a Switch. They were set up in a local game store. And they had, I just remember it was Batman Arkham City Armored Edition. I remember playing it, and again, games is something we'll touch on in a second. And feeling and trying to use that touchscreen. This is one of the kind of even more resistive a touchscreen than the DS's had. And I remember those were pretty, those were a bit of a pain to use. And the Wii U's, I remember thinking, this is a really horrible touchscreen to use. Again, we'll talk about when it comes to the Switch, but What are our thoughts in terms of, you know, that touchscreen, and given this, you know, so many games, you know, tried to use that quote unquote second screen in their gameplay, which at least was a novel attempt from them.
Yeah, I think luckily, I guess, I never really got super into any games that use the touchscreen as a primary or even significant mode of control. I mean, Smash 4 is easily my most played game, and there's not, as far as I know, even any modes that use the touchscreen as their primary form of control. I mean, obviously, you're playing 8-player Smash, you got plenty of controllers that are not the gamepad.
I'd imagine Smash is more just for the map, isn't it, on with the Wii U?
Yeah, is that, I don't even remember what the gamepad was used for. Though I actually do think that, like, if someone was using the gamepad as a controller, just had the game on there. But like, you know, Mario Kart 8, you're not using the touch screen. 3D World, you're not using the touch screen. So it wasn't I think until games like Mario Maker or Kirby and the Rainbow Curse that are primarily controlled by that touchscreen that I ever heard people complaining about the resistancy of the touchscreen. But even when it's you using it for the menus or to like draw from Miiverse, it is you have to press slightly harder and like slightly to the side just to get things to go the way you want. But I never had a huge problem with it, mostly because a lot of the games that I played didn't have the touchscreen as a primary focus.
Yeah, I remember. I'm thinking back now into what touchscreen examples I can give, and I genuinely can't think of any apart from the game Zombie U, which
Prop comedy here. Hold on. Boom.
If you got it, yeah, there it is. Ta-da! I weirdly
never played it. Got it for like $6 at a used shop one time.
I played it and I weirdly fell in love with it. It's not, you know, it's not game of the year or anything, but the way it used the actual touchpad and touch screen, I found interesting in the genre of horror, because in Zombie U, when you're moving around, you know, there's zombies, obviously, and when you'd pause to look at your inventory, your character on your main screen would be looking around still, sort of looking up and down from his bag, checking, you know, over his shoulders, and down on your little touchpad screen would be your inventory. So you almost were managing that as well. You could take a second to just glance up to check if you were safe, keep managing your inventory.
Yeah.
And that, I think, was my favorite use of the touchscreen elements. You know, like Tucker was saying, I don't remember any others really.
Did you have any games that you played, Sam, that were more focused on the touchscreen?
None that I tried. I must admit, as I said with Dan, I never owned one, so it's only with in brief kind of uses in the local game store that I actually tried it. But I tried it, for a little bit of, I think you could do a little bit of web browsing, and that's kind of where I most noticed the resistive nature of the touchscreen.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yep. I think I tried that once or twice, and it very frustrating.
Yeah.
Just accidental misclicks. Even with just like, you know, you would have thought the stylus would almost add a bit more accuracy. It felt like a large DS, but no chance.
Yeah. At least you've got a bit more accuracy usually on the DSs, which was a weird little parallel there. So I want to talk about the launch lineup. So obviously we've mentioned Zombie U, which was that was the game that they were trying to sell the console with. But I'm just going to name some of the kind of the other ones that kind of stand out. They had Assassin's Creed 3, Batman Arkham City Armored Edition, Black Ops 2, Darksiders 2, Epic Mickey 2, Just Dance 4, Mass Effect 3 Special Edition, stuff like Ninja Gaiden, Rabbids Land, Scribblenauts, Sonic All-Star Racing Transformed, Tekken Tag Tournament 2 Wii U Edition, and, you know, kind of the usual things you'd expect to see on, you know, with a new console release, stuff like FIFA 13, and there also was a shooter. Where was it? I can't remember what the other one. Oh, that was it. The Call of Duty, what I already mentioned, and obviously Nintendo's usual kind of release in-house game, that being Nintendo Land, and also obviously New Super Mario Bros. U. So, how do we feel about the launch lineup? You know, it's compared to some other consoles, like Tucky, you covered on Backlog Banter. You know, it's at least a decent lineup of titles, but obviously you've then got the caveat of that stuff like, you know, Call of Duty Black Ops 2 and Arkham City and FIFA. You know, they are much scaled down versions of the versions that are available on PC and 360 and PS3. Tucker, we'll start with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is something that I've thought a good amount about as we entered this last generation, or the current generation of consoles, the PS5 and Xbox Series consoles, of what does launch lineup really mean since the age of digital content and more prevalent third-party support. What we've thought about launch lineups as for the majority of games history is, you know, what are the 2 or 3 major games from the console's creators that the games are launching with. You think about Combat Evolved, you're thinking about Mario 64, now you're thinking about Breath of the Wild, or even thinking back like the PS4, Killzone Shadowfall.
Yeah.
But most consoles nowadays launch with 1 or 2 games from that first party creator, whichever console it ends up being, and then just, you know, a smattering of ports. Even this current generation, it was Assassin's Creed Valhalla and Watch Dogs Legion and whatever the current Call of Duty was. This is kind of similar. I think this is kind of the generation, or with the Wii U, is where we started seeing this trend of, you know, they kind of just launch softly. It's ports. It's a couple of small third-party things, but nothing's really pushing the console. So I don't have anything against this launch lineup, because, as I'm saying, I think it feels like kind of the norm, at least especially nowadays.
Yeah.
But there's also not even one game here that really sticks out. I mean, when you talk about any of these other consoles, PS5 launches with Miles Morales. That's, you know, one of the games of that year. Or, of course, the Switch with actually a pretty comparable launch lineup in terms of size. I think, there was like 15, maybe 20 games on that launch lineup. But that had Breath of the Wild. And the Breath of the Wild comparison for this is Nintendo Land or New Soup U. And I've played both those games, and I don't particularly like either of them that much. So I think from the lack of any one game to really grab onto, that's the problem. But in terms of the amount of third-party support, the breadth of games, the amount of genres and third-party support, I actually think this is probably one of the strongest aspects of the Wii U, is launching with a pretty good amount of games and pretty diverse lineup.
Yeah. Matt?
Yeah, I found I definitely agree with what Tucker was saying, with feeling very similar to how consoles are launching, you know, nowadays. That it is a lot of ports from, you know, games that we already recognize from either the previous generations or completely different consoles. Like here, we're talking about Batman Arkham City. You know, the first thing I think of when I hear stuff like that is, that's like an Xbox or a PlayStation.
Yes, of course.
Type of game.
Yeah, and same with Call of Duty. Assassin's Creed. Mass Effect.
And I think they missed what I think it almost lends itself to the same sort of issue that people had with sort of the mix-up of identity between the Wii and the Wii U, is that it didn't seem like a whole new console, because it like you say, it didn't have those big knockout Wii U games.
Yeah.
And as well, I think the types of games too, they're very they're very Nintendo-y sorts of games, like, you know, Nintendo Land, obviously, but stuff like Rabbids Land or Epic Mickey or Super Mario, which are great, but they're all the sorts of games that we are sort of used to coming from Nintendo. And I think one of the main successes for the original sort of Wii, that they were sort of hoping to bring over, you know, with the Wii U, was the originality of, like, you know, Wii Sports and those sorts of interactive games that are nothing like traditional games.
Yeah.
And that's what pulled people originally to the Wii, and I think they completely missed that with the Wii U. It was like stealing the name Wii, try steal some of that success without stealing any of the actual content that gave that word all the success it had.
Yeah, sure.
I was thinking it's quite interesting. Go on.
I was going to say as well, I think they sort of noticed that in the release of the Switch.
Yeah.
Because Switch came out with very, almost what I'd call Wii games. Their launch lineup, it was very simple sort of, sit down, play for 5 minutes, sort of tabletop simulators and stuff like that. Like there was that, I forget the actual name of the game, but it was a game of a collection of 30 different like tabletop games or chess and stuff like that.
Oh yes, yeah.
It's those sort of games that people that don't normally play video games would pick up and have a good time with, and then could move on.
Yeah,
sure.
Sorry, what were you going to say, Tucker?
Were you referring to Clubhouse games, 51 Worldwide Classics?
Yes, that is absolutely what
that was a 2020 Switch game. I'd say like the analog to that the Switch launch was 1-2 Switch. But that's actually a game I kind of like.
And that one as well. I completely forgot about that.
I do wonder with, we look at the Wii, and it's actually something funny you mentioned 1-2 Switch, Tucker, because I think one of the big oversights, along with, the price perhaps, but I understand your argument, Tucker, is that, for the Wii, the thing that really sold that was that it came bundled, regardless of which one you bought, with Wii Sports. So they could show off the functionality, what the Wii could do. The Wii U, they didn't really do that. With the premium version, sure, you got Nintendo Land, which, that's probably the game that Nintendo intended to show off the breadth and what the Wii U could do. But that wasn't included in every single Wii U that was sold. So people would go, okay, which game do I pick up then?
Because of that, I actually have the physical copy here of Nintendo Land, which is kind of an oddity because I feel like most people can think about this as the game that was preloaded on a lot of Wii U's. I mean, it certainly came on mine, but I found this for like $5. I mean, it's not a game that people really particularly care about nowadays. So they did release it on physical though.
Yeah. I also think, looking forward to, just quickly looking forward to the Switch. As you say, Tucker, 1-2 Switch, another one, should have been included in every single package that they did of the Switch, and I don't understand why it wasn't. It shows off the functionality of that system so well. Do we think that was just kind of an oversight from Nintendo, or do we think that they presumed, that their library was so vast that they could just, someone would buy a Wii U, go, oh, what games have we got, and they wouldn't necessarily want to play a Nintendo Land, because after really Wii Sports, a lot of people would buy that and then maybe get Wii Sports Resort and maybe try a few others, and then they wouldn't kind of look into the rest of the Wii U's library.
Yeah, I'm not sure. No, it's the psychology of Nintendo that makes decisions that make sense sometimes, that most of the time don't. It's as someone who wasn't familiar with the launch lineup, I think maybe it was them just trying to show that they had third-party support first and foremost, is because a lot of this lineup, even though it is ports of the biggest series at the time of Arkham and Call of Duty and what was the other one? Mass Effect and stuff. Like, this is the serious man's Nintendo consoles. Obviously, that's not the legacy that the Wii U had, but it's kind of what they launched with.
Matt?
I just want to go back to what you were saying about Nintendo Land. I think it's a very interesting point you made about it almost teaching you what the Wii U is. Because I was talking earlier about how, I almost didn't know there was a stylus and other issues like that I've had with it. And I have never played Nintendo Land, and I don't think I even own it. I don't physically own it, and I don't think I even digitally own it.
Yeah.
It's just something that completely passed me by. And like you said, it's a game that works as a tutorial for a new type of console. And I missed that, and so I did struggle with it in certain aspects.
I also should say, like you were saying about, this is the serious man's Nintendo console. Another one they were really trying to sell it on. It's interesting you mentioned that, because obviously, Zombie U and Darksiders, and of course later Bayonetta 2 were exclusives to this. I think Darksiders might have been a timed exclusive. Obviously it did come out later.
Yeah, that's definitely somewhere else. And so is Zombie U because it got made into Zombie in other places. And also Bayonetta 2 is now of course on Switch. But...
Yeah. I think Zombie U might have been another time exclusive from memory, but they were also trying to sell it on the latest Lego game, Lego City Undercover. That was exclusive to the Wii U. So it's interesting, as you say, that kind of weird kind of parallel between the same, this is now the serious person's Nintendo console, but also, doing what they can to still try and keep that kid or that younger audience that Nintendo, especially with the Wii and obviously the DSs and so on and so forth, have really thrived on.
Yeah, and that is, I think, that's the legacy that the Wii U ended up ultimately building, is kind of the opposite of what we are talking about that they tried to launch with these serious games. I mean, that third-party support dropped off so fast.
Yeah.
I mean, you maybe got another Call of Duty game. I know that Black Flag came out on there, but none of these other franchises kept coming out on Wii U.
Yeah.
They were lucky that they got them at first. But what the Wii U ended up becoming was the joke of the industry, because for so many of these years of the Wii U's life cycle, it was the kids games, the most kiddie game versions of a lot of these Nintendo franchises.
Yeah. Matt, any thoughts?
Well, I was looking at my collection of games here now, and I think it's another great example that you're absolutely right, is that it is a collection of third-party games, and I've got like Splinter Cell Blacklist, which if I didn't have the Wii U, would have been something I bought for one of my other consoles. I think I almost bought that on the Wii U as a way to justify the purchase.
Sure, yeah.
Which I think almost stayed with me for that logic stayed with me. I think for its entire sort of life cycle. I would use it for Smash Bros, like you said, quite a lot. And then it was a Smash Bros machine for me. And
that's actually an interesting thing about the Wii U's library, as we'll sort of talk about some of these games, is there were a lot of first-party games, but so many of them flew under the radar, not only because they were more niche, but because the Wii U didn't sell very well, as we'll also get to. But that for most people, I mean, not very many people had a Wii U. We only have 2 out of the 3 people here had a Wii U on this call. But that for most people, it was a Smash and Mario Kart machine. Because those are the only games that sold commensurate to the other entries in their series.
100%. I'm looking at it now. It was also, I think, just because Breath of the Wild was actually released on the Wii U as well.
It's true it was. It's true it was. Yeah.
Which it like, I'm looking at it, and that's how I played it originally. And that
really?
Surprises me. Yeah. I think I was so I was almost burned by the Wii U because like I said, I had to almost justify purchasing it. I was almost tempted out of buying a Switch. Nearly just completely skipped it because I thought I've seen this all before, and I didn't want to fall back into that trap of this will be the next one. So I sort of gave it a good amount of time, and I hesitated to get a Switch. So I ended up playing the entirety of Breath of the Wild on my Wii U.
Wow.
And that I think by the end of that, I had justified in my head, this is fine. This is made up for it.
I mean, with a game like Breath of the Wild, though, I mean, that is, even though let's be honest, most people see it as a Switch game, because that's how the vast majority of people played 100%. It was developed for Wii U primarily, ported to Switch. But that's like the big Wii U game, if you consider it a Wii U game. Of course, we can talk about Mario Maker, Splatoon, and stuff like that, but Breath of the Wild is the big generation-defining game from Nintendo on Wii U, but people see it as a Switch game. The Wii U even lost that.
It almost topped off its life cycle instead of starting it fresh like it did the Switch.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Matt. You must be one of 3 people in the world that played Breath of the Wild on the Wii U.
I wonder if I can find out how many Wii U copies of Breath of the Wild were sold, because Breath of the Wild sold very well, but I don't know how much of that was Wii U.
Yeah,
I'm just do some research, you guys, and keep talking.
Given the Wii U sales we'll cover later, I guess it's probably not that many. while Tucker looks at that, I just wanted to quickly stay on the games for a minute, because as we read from that list, a lot of third-party stuff, a lot of stuff that had other versions already out that obviously were better, much more graphically impressive, and were probably just better experiences. One of the things I mentioned a little bit earlier, that obviously the Wii U launched in 2012, a year before the PS4 and the Xbox One came out. Around about 9 months, 11 to 9 months before GTA 5 came out, which is obviously, that was kind of the game that usually people associate Rockstar with. This is when the next generation, really kicks into gear, or people start making games of the caliber of the systems available. How do we feel about the fact that, Nintendo launched mid to late generation, and they launched a system that, as we said earlier, was already a downgrade on what was available, and a year later, they were being blown away by the Xbox One and the PS4?
I think that's such a quintessential Nintendo thing to do, almost to remove themselves from those expectations.
Yeah.
The other consoles are held to. Is like, I don't think anybody looks at Nintendo for groundbreaking new hardware.
Yeah.
And if they do, it's usually in terms of peripherals, like like how their obsession with movement controls and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's kind of it's either the worst place or the best place that the console could have launched. Because if you think about this console launching after the start of that next generation, that would have been even worse.
Yeah.
For it being underpowered compared to those, but as you were saying, also either below or on par with the systems that had launched in 2007 and 8, or even before that with the 360 and stuff. But I also think that it's the worst place that can launch, because at that point people are tiring of the older hardware. This comes out, it's on par with that stuff, and then it just gets completely wiped away by the new generation of systems. And I think you can see them learning from this mistake with the Switch, because that also launched mid-generation and feel like fits into a weird place. Like, okay, which generation does this really feel like it's a part of? Because it was alongside Xbox One and PS4 for so long, but now it's still existing alongside PS5 and Xbox Series. But that was able to step out of the problem of being overshadowed, because it absolutely wasn't competing with those systems in any way. But the Wii U was, when it came out. The games that we were talking about, those third-party games of Mass Effect and Black Ops and Assassin's Creed, those are the big current generation games of that time, and that's exactly what Xbox One and PS4 launched with. I mean, they didn't have good launch lineups either, and they launched with Black Flag and Black Ops or whatever, and so did the Wii U. But then those were the worst versions. So I do think that it probably was. The place that it was positioned in between these generations is also part of the reason it kind of slipped to the wayside.
Yeah, it's interesting. Also, I think you're right. In certain aspects, look at the Switch, for example. I think it's seen now that the Switch isn't really competing with the PS4 and the Xbox One, and then later, obviously, the Series X and S and the PS5. But I think part of the problem that Nintendo have for themselves is that, obviously, that the generation they were just coming off, they were the runaway winners. 101 million units is, I think they were at least 20 million more than Sony and Microsoft sold, which are around the same, according to recent figures. So it looks like such a shot in the foot that you go from leading the others by such a margin to falling so far behind again, and we'll get to the sales figures shortly. I want to touch on something that when I was having this conversation with Dan, that I ended up conceding, and I want to get kind of your thoughts on it. When I was initially putting this together, I'll admit, as someone that obviously didn't own a Wii, but trying to do quite a lot of research, I did come away with a thought of there was quite a lackluster first party offering from Nintendo towards the Wii U. Obviously, you have stuff like obviously Smash Brothers. Obviously, there's Splatoon. There was, I think, there was a Mario I think it was Mario Brothers U, wasn't it? The one where you could place the platforms with the touchpad.
Yep. New Super Mario Bros. U.
Yes, which was one of the launch games. And then obviously you get kind of Zelda remakes coming along. How do we feel about the support that Nintendo actually provided for the Wii U from themselves? Because obviously we have to remember at the same time they still had the 3DS out, which was obviously dominating still in the handheld space. So a lot of things like obviously Pokemon games would all go to the Wii U, other than something like Pokken Tournament that would then go to the Wii U. Obviously, everything goes to the 3DS. How do we feel about Nintendo's actual physical support for the Wii U with their first party games?
This is the place that I have never criticized the Wii U, and I'm interested to hear your argument for why it was disappointing lineup for you, because I think the idea of it being disappointing is coming from two angles. Is not a lot of people played a lot of these games because the Wii U wasn't very popular, and also a lot of these games have now been superseded in better versions, more accessible versions, more popular versions on the Switch.
Yeah.
And so when you think about so much of this console's first party lineup, which is those are the games that people talk about for it. But frankly, I think it's fine. I actually think it's impressive how many games were on there and are still some of the best in each of their franchises. I'm just looking at, well, of course, Breath of the Wild, but that's kind of its own story. But Pikmin 3, best Pikmin game. Mario Kart 8, of course, now with Deluxe, that's the superior version. But Mario Kart 8, one of the best Mario Kart games. Tropical Freeze, one of the best 2D platformers. Smash Wii U, of course, at the time, one of the best in its series. And Bayonetta 2, some, even myself included, would argue that's still better than Bayonetta 3.
Yeah.
So there's a good number of these games here that keep it, I think, pretty heartily alongside the first-party lineups of most of Nintendo's other systems. Because I would say that Tropical Freeze is better than the SNES Donkey Kong Country games, or Mario Kart 8 is better than the Mario Karts on the other systems. So I think it's neck and neck with most other ones, and there also are a number of smaller games that are less popular, but give that library a slightly more depth than I think most people give it credit for.
Yeah, I think definitely the Switch almost stole some of its thunder as well. Like you say, that those first-party games, like Mario Kart 8, it just went straight to the Switch.
Yeah.
And I think a good quantity of people would look at that as just a Switch game. I could easily see them completely overlooking that it even existed on the Wii U.
Yeah. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe especially. Obviously, that's the superior version, more popular version. But even something like Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition, Hyrule Warriors was the first time there was a Nintendo Muso crossover, and now we get those. You blink and you've got 3 more of them. Yeah. But that started there, and Tropical Freeze, Pikmin 3 Deluxe, New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, and 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. I mean, these are some of the biggest selling games on Switch, but 95% of their content, I mean 99.9 with Tropical Freeze minus funky mode, are from the Wii U version. So it's interesting how Wii U ports have kind of backwardsly decreased the interest in the Wii U's library.
Yeah. As I said, I said this with Dan when we spoke previously, and I was again concede that the point is, I think from my point of view, I think my thing is I see none of those I see personally as a true system seller. Sure. Because of obviously the poor sales, which again we'll get into, of the Wii U. I've kind of had this thought in my brain of, well, there's nothing really that stuck out to people. I know
sure.
Splatoon and Smash Brothers and Mario Kart, etc. are good games, but there is certainly an aspect to it of seeing some of these, especially something like Mario Kart, which for the Wii was a massive system seller, and seeing that it didn't have that same impact on the Wii U, maybe, obviously does cloud the perception of the quality of those games.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's a sort of a which came first, chicken or the egg situation, though, because you think about how well Mario Kart Wii or Brawl sold. Of course, I love both of those games, but I would say that Smash Wii U and Mario Kart 8 are the better games.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to think, like, if there's not a if Smash and Mario Kart and the best versions of Smash and Mario Kart to that date weren't system sellers, I think that it's, especially by the point that both those games released the life cycle of the Wii U, it's disinterest in the Wii U and not these games. Because I think most people that played Smash 4 or Mario Kart 8 would say that they're some of the best, if not the best entries in both those series. And so they are system sellers. But the Wii U not being popular is what makes those games not feel like system sellers.
Yeah. I also think perhaps going back and watching some of the, again, looking at some of the directs that were leading up until obviously 2070's release of Wii U, I saw that stuff like Star Fox Zero, which obviously got universally panned.
Yes.
So again, perhaps that has an effect on it. Matt, what are your thoughts on kind of the perhaps the perception of the lack of a true Wii U system seller is maybe the best way to put it?
Well, yeah, I was nodding along the entire time to that conversation of the fact that if those games can't sell the Wii U, what could really? It's like you say, it must be something
in the water.
Yeah, it must be something with the Wii U itself that it just either drove people away actively or just wasn't able to catch their interest. I think from a broader audience perspective, a much I'm trying to avoid the term casual gamer or something like that. Is naming it the Wii U is more akin to the Xbox 360 and the sort of Xbox Elite that came after it. It's where people think, oh, it's an upgrade for the same generation.
And
then just turn away.
Well, especially because to that point, there had never been, except for Super Nintendo to Nintendo, or the NES, SNES, there had never been similar Nintendo console names. You think about how much of a pun intended revolution it is to go from GameCube to Wii. Those names don't share anything in common. So you go to Wii to Wii, it's like, what does this really mean? But the last thing I want to say about the perception of these games is, I think you can pretty clearly argue that the biggest games on Wii U are system sellers because they were able to be system sellers, but for the Switch. You think about the biggest games on the Switch, the 4 biggest games: Breath of the Wild, Splatoon 2, especially early in the Switch's life cycle, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Most of the content, if not all of the content from those games, are based on the Wii U versions. They're just spruced up a little bit. And Splatoon 2, Breath of the Wild, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate are some of the best-selling games of all time. All of them are. So, like, you think about Splatoon 2 to Splatoon 1 to Splatoon 2, it's not that big of an upgrade. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, obviously a port. Breath of the Wild, obviously a port. It was, there was the argument of, is Smash Ultimate a port of Wii U because it is similar, same engine, similar models, but those games are great. They were just on Wii U, so that's really where the problem lies.
The only thing you're missing about is Animal Crossing New Horizons, and then you've got that is that is the foundation of the Switch sales. So I want to move on to something that I think really stands out, especially in the generation in the midst at which it launched. And that was I think poor is probably being fair. It was a diabolical online offering from Nintendo. Obviously the Virtual Console is kind of, that's a thing I think it can be fairly debated, but the key thing that I always go back to, it's the thing that also, partially stunted, I think, the PS3, was the lack of true social features. The stuff like, a true party chat, you still can't do that on Nintendo Switch. You need your phone and a bit of plastic to actually be able to, what is Nintendo's way of actually playing Switch games with your friends. It was a worse multiplayer offering because, not just I don't believe the online foundations is probably the best way to put it, were built for multiplayer gaming, which at that time, obviously with the 360 and the PS3, that was taken off at such an enormous rate.
See, and hearing that and looking at the gamepad now in front of me, it's surprising because if I was to be handed this with no knowledge of the Wii U, I would think it would be such a social console.
Yeah.
Because above and below the main touchscreen are immediately two different features. Yeah, for being social. It has a front-facing camera and a microphone there, built in, ready to go.
Yeah, and that's interesting because obviously that was used. I don't think it's any active any longer, but there was like a FaceTime feature for Wii U, and obviously Miiverse was a big thing. And frankly, I think the argument could be made that that's one of the most innovative social options that a console has ever had. But it just had different social options, and I think that the fact that Nintendo on the first party side has never really focused on online multiplayer, especially for their games, and why those games are appealing is why it feels bad in retrospect, and continues to a solid degree with the Switch. But there are a lot of these games that did have online, and I never really played almost any of them online. I probably played Smash Wii U online a couple times, but we know that Mario Kart 8 had online. Splatoon, obviously primarily a online multiplayer game. And Smash 4 had solid online, but these are really the only examples. So I think that the lack of online infrastructure and social infrastructure is just kind of emblematic of where the focus of the console was, is single player games or local multiplayer games, because Nintendo was still bringing that over from how local multiplayer oriented the Wii U was, with games like Mario Party 10 or 3D World, which are geared towards local multiplayer.
Yeah.
Or New Super Mario Bros. U and Nintendo Land, which are the games that the system launched with.
Yeah.
I think they were just too slow on the draw for the actual follow-ups of the games, what their hardware had sort of prepared them for. When you were mentioning earlier about the, just moments ago, about the examples with actual multiplayer elements in them, did you mention Splatoon?
I did, yeah. That's the only one with like...
Yeah, it's sort of, the only one. I think it made a...
That and Mario Maker. Actually, I forgot about Mario Maker. But obviously that's a very social game.
Yeah, I think Mario Maker is also a good example of it being a good sort of platform for that social interaction and video games, and the Wii U actually pulling its weight in providing that experience, and that sort of being it. Like there should have been millions more titles like that available.
Yeah,
sure.
But the two that they had, as successful as they were, and they are successful because they've continued all the way onto the Switch, obviously was not enough to stop that sinking ship.
Yeah. And I mentioned briefly that the Virtual Console. So the Virtual Console is one of those things that Nintendo from time to time, remember, and then pump loads of stuff into it, and then other points of the year go, is that a thing? No, we're just going to ignore that. There was a real kind of inconsistent addition of games onto the Virtual Console during the Wii U's lifespan. There was also a massive disparity on the quality and the amount of games that were given in each region. Like obviously, Japan got an enormous number as compared to the US, which got significantly less. And I guess this point also kind of flows into the Switch. How do we think Nintendo's Virtual Console offering really kind of addresses, for example, with the lineup, addresses kind of the lack of certain genre of games, and then maybe how they kind of have taken it into the Switch, for example?
The Wii U Virtual Console, I would say, outside of what I was saying with the first party library, is its greatest strength. It's not something that I ever really played into. I've played 3 or 4 Virtual Console games within the last 2 years, but I never used it when the Wii U was a current generation system. But it has the most robust back catalog of games and accessible to other consoles. And I mean, there's DS games and N64 and like like Neo Geo games and stuff, and they're all available on there, and they play well. And you also have to remember that the Wii U has a Wii inside of it. You can use the entire Wii inside the Wii U. So I do think that, like, from the video game historian perspective, the Wii U is like one of the best systems. I mean, you can play basically every Mario and Zelda game on the Wii U, even the DS ones, which is not something you can say about any other system. But the problem with it comes that's only true for a very specific period of time, because you had to wait until all these games were added, which by that point, no one cared about the Wii U.
Yeah. And
now, by March next year, May next year, they're not going to be available anymore because the Wii U shop is going down. But for that period of 5-6 years, the Wii U is one of the best retro machines you can get in terms of accessibility, but only for those 5 years.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great example of why that's such a shame that, its death is coming in, like you said, a few months. Mm-hmm. It's because I think that is a great example of how consoles going forward should implement backwards compatibility, because it was such an all-in-one, consumer-friendly way to go about it, and I think especially now in this harsher, more money-grabbing sort of landscape that these companies are heading towards. Something like that, it is like a breath of fresh air. I think it's quite sad to lose.
Just funny to say about Nintendo in this period, because of course they were, very hostile towards, online creators and people that were just trying to catalogue games history, like, notoriously, when there was a website, I can't remember the name of it, they were uploading copies of Nintendo Power onto a site just to archive that they existed. Nintendo sent them a cease and desist letter, but at the same time they're doing, as Tucker says, some of the best, to a point, history of their own games with their virtual console, but then that goes hand in hand with, as Tucker says, the fact that you have to wait for those actual games to be uploaded, and they were so infrequent with actually putting new virtual console games on the system.
Yeah, they exist there now. And if you get a Wii U and you're willing to spend the cash, you can get most previous generation titles on Wii U
for now.
Really, GameCube is the only system that the Wii U doesn't have access to in some form or fashion. Of course, there are examples of that are not true, but they're through Wii, because you can play like Metroid Prime Collection or the new Play Control versions of like Power Tennis and Pikmin 1. But the GameCube library is also pretty comparable to the size of the first party Wii U library. So that balance is so heavily in favor of the Wii U, of being able to play, to the point of the Wii U had been released, basically any Nintendo game except for 3DS and GameCube.
Yeah.
And for Virtual Boy, but
That is so funny to me, because the cupboard in which my Wii U now sits is right next to my very old GameCube.
There they go. They're friends.
So I have the entirety of Nintendo history in one little cupboard.
Yeah.
Good.
But now, like you say.
So I want to talk, gentlemen, about, that was kind of like the moment that the Wii U entered the market, how it was looking compared to what was already there and what was coming up, what Nintendo were offering. I want to start talking about kind of how it then started to go downhill. And it started, unfortunately, for, obviously, we mentioned that the majority of third-party games were lesser versions of stuff that were already out on the PS3 and the Xbox 360. But then only a matter of months after it released. So let's remember, the 18th of November is when it launched for Tucker, and the 30th is when it launched for us here in the UK. Then in May 2013, EA announced that they were reducing support and noted that no games were in development for the Wii U. So that was kind of the big, that was alarm bells, and that was 6 months after the console's release. Then in June 2013 at E3, Ubisoft stated that there were going to be no more Wii U exclusives until sales improved. Though they did say that they if as soon as that sales increase did come, they would be more than happy to continue with that because they said they believed in the system. But that was a kind of a warning sign. And then, yeah, exactly, sucker. And then the final one, in July 2013, Bethesda announced that there were 0 Wii U games in development.
So, did Bethesda ever put out a Wii U game? I don't know if they did.
No, they didn't. But I think that was more of a blanket thing of we have no games and we're not going to be making any Wii U games.
Yeah.
So how much of an impact do we think that this, the pulling quite rapidly of third-party support, obviously sales that never really picked up for the Wii U, and that's another thing we'll get onto momentarily, but kind of a lack of third-party support. Matt, as someone who had a Wii U from, you had a Wii U from the point, where EA and Ubisoft and Bethesda made these announcements.
Yeah, no, I think that made a huge impact because it's a public, statement of lack of faith. Pretty much, it's them jumping ship.
I mean, Ubisoft making it E3 is like could you make it any more?
Yeah,
like any more of a statement?
Damaging.
Yeah,
saying this is over. Yeah. I'm not going down with this.
And, it's interesting to think about this because this is probably the most damaging statement to a console success that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Because this has never happened before. I mean, you think about like the fact that third-party games were going to PS1 instead of N64. It's not like it's not like Square Enix came out on the stage and they're like, we will not be making Final Fantasy for N64. It just came out on PS1.
Yeah.
And of course, that was a different era and the spread of information was different, but E3 big at this time. Everyone's like, okay, Nintendo may be coming back. They've got some games in the works. You've seen Mario Kart 8, you've seen the Smash 4 is on the way. And then suddenly the 3 biggest third-party companies, the ones that have their own E3 showcases, are like, no, we're just not. Yeah, we're not going to help. We're not doing it anymore. And I'm looking at the big third-party games that came out for Wii U, and most of them were that launch lineup, as we said, like trying to push it as the serious man's Nintendo console. But like, other than that, it's like Call of Duty Ghosts, Watch Dogs, Injustice, and Black Flag. Like, that's kind of it, other than what the console launched with. So you notice, like, they were there for, like, the next 6 months or, like, a year after launch, but obviously they all just pulled out immediately. Which has never happened before. Never happened before in another console.
Not that rapidly after a console's release, no.
No.
I think it definitely killed, other companies' confidence in the Wii U.
Yeah.
And it also it killed, in a way, it killed sort of my confidence in it. Even as someone who owned the Wii U and was enjoying these games, I was sort of like, well, that's it. It's already over.
Yeah.
And for in a big way, that was correct. It sort of was over. Right up until, led Breath of the Wild, it sort of sat there like we were talking about that virtual console was a great addition, but it sort of needed to be because who else was bringing the content?
True.
So obviously, you mentioned the kind of lack of true support of this. I think this is when, obviously 2013 is obviously, we're less than kind of 12 months after the console's release. This is, as we said, when we see things really hit rock bottom for the Wii U, I think. It was announced, Nintendo announced in August that following on, or to coincide, with the release of Wind Waker HD, they will be taking a $50 price cut to the Wii U. Obviously, this is not the first time that Nintendo had to do this. They had to do it with the 3DS shortly after its release. And, this would then obviously lead into the fact that the Wii U had sold less consoles than the Dreamcast at the point the Dreamcast was killed off.
Yeesh.
Which is, that is kind of a damning indictment of the Wii U.
Yeah, almost passing its crown as a video game console clown.
Yeah, exactly.
History.
But how significant do we think, that... that moment was, Nintendo, when they've got Wind Waker HD, I believe it might have been the first Zelda game out on the Wii U, and they've gone,
Probably.
at the same time, we're doing a $50 price cut because we need, because we are struggling so much with the sales of this console.
I think maybe it was just them trying to recapture what had happened with the 3DS, because you think about the 3DS getting its price cut, that helped that system tremendously. I mean, it's one of the best-selling consoles of all time. Nintendo's surely happy with that, and that's what carried them through that generation, and why you can't say like Nintendo was wholeheartedly the clown of that generation of consoles, because one of their systems sold incredibly well with zero competition. The Vita does not count. But is that like Wii U cut at $50 like they did with the 3DS was also cut about that amount? Am I correct about that?
Yeah. If I recall correctly, it was about $50 price cut for the Wii U as well. 3DS as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but the difference I think between those two is that the 3DS's price cut came, I believe, around the launch of 3D Land and Mario Kart 7, which means that it has system selling games to go along with that price cut, and people are like, oh, okay, I'm looking forward to playing a new 3D Mario and Mario Kart, two of the biggest system-selling series that you can get out there in the games industry. And simultaneously, the price is being cut $50. This is a no-brainer. But launching with that price cut with around the launch of a port of a GameCube game, a great port of a GameCube game, but that's not the way that you really generate excitement. I mean, if it had done its price cut with Mario Kart 8 or 3D World, I think it would have been a different story.
Yeah. Matt?
I'm not sure how much else I have to add to that. I think I 100% agree. I think people were watching and waiting, and what they were watching and waiting for were those, big system selling games. So they weren't going to notice a price cut that came alongside, a port. Which, if they wanted, they would have had.
So of course the Wii U, I was going to say 3DS there, but that'd be a very different discussion. The Wii U chugged along for a few more years. Obviously, all of those were in 2013, just a year after the console's release. Wii U chugged along until the 31st of January 2017, a few months before the Switch's release, when it was discontinued. Latest figures. It's funny you mentioned the Vita there, Tucker, because as of December 2019, so this is the latest figures that are available, the Wii U sold 13.56 million units. The Vita sold 16 million units.
Oh, sheesh. There you go. I guess I knew that, but I never really thought about it.
Cognitive dissonance. You didn't want to think about it.
So
interesting.
So
I've got a Vita. Hey, I'm not part of the problem.
So am I. Unfortunately, I don't know about you, Tucker. I've got the horrible second generation one, so it's got a worse screen, a worse joysticks and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know why they made that horrible downgrade to the Vita. But obviously, as we say, those are horrific numbers. It's one of the worst selling consoles of all time. Though, as Dan pointed out, and it's something I'd forgotten, if you look at the graph of Nintendo selling consoles, it's a constant down, and then you get to the Wii, which is obviously a massive spike, and the Wii U continues that. Obviously, there's another massive spike with the Switch. But
look out, next console.
Yeah, exactly.
Switch 2 is going to sell 5 million units.
So, obviously, as we say, its legacy is it's one of the worst selling consoles of all time. But we're talking about the Wii U's legacy. Do we think it was kind of ahead of its time? Given a lot of the features that would then go on to be used, partly by the Switch. Do we think it was a not fully thought out by Nintendo to the extent, if they'd fully committed to it? Because obviously, this was at a time where, as we said, they still had the 3DS out at this point. So their attention was kind of split between the Wii U and the 3DS.
I think it is the not fully thought out, but I think that is one side of the coin, and it being ahead of its time is the other side of the coin. Because I do think you're right in the ideas that began the concept of the Switch, of being able to play on the TV and on the go, and trying slightly more robust online features and having that virtual. Well, I guess the virtual console started with Wii, so that's not really a thing. But those elements are what made the Switch happen. However, because they weren't fully thought out, it didn't. I mean, you can't half-ass something and still expect people to be proud that you tried. Well, I mean, I guess you can in some circumstances, but certainly not in the regard of a Wii U, which obviously didn't sell very well.
Mm.
I think as well, the word I know earlier you used the word underdeveloped, and I don't think it's. I don't agree that it was underdeveloped, or even that it was potentially ahead of its time. I think it was, a perfect time for that to sort of come out. But I think it was just so poorly advertised, almost, that it just wasn't something people were gonna give a second look at. People, if they enjoyed the Wii, they had the Wii. They didn't have the Wii for its brand new specs. They didn't want an upgrade. Wii U came out and it looked like an upgrade, and it just wasn't something that those people were interested in.
Well, again, with that, we mentioned at the very beginning, we come back to the name and that combined with everything else. As we said, with all the advertising, it was just the controller that made it look like, it was just an accessory for the Wii U. So many things that Nintendo calls themselves, much like what would quite funnily happen with Microsoft and the Xbox One. I'd like to have been, as I said with Dan, I'd like to have been in the focus group where they decided that Wii U was the right name and the Xbox One. I'd like to see those groups of people and question about what the hell they were thinking. But a few more positive things. I think it's fair to say that this discussion we've been having has been very negative towards the Wii U for the most part. Unfortunately, that comes with the fact it's one of the worst selling consoles of all time. But talking about, the legs, I want to talk about some good things. So I want to start with, what would you say was the best game that you played on the Wii U? So we'll start with you.
Well, this is interesting. I think I might have mentioned this earlier, maybe it was before we started recording, but the best games that I've played that the Wii U had to offer, I didn't play on Wii U.
Yeah.
I played them on Switch. Because so many of those games have been ported, and for the vast majority of them made superior. I mean, there's no reason to go play 3D World on Wii U when you can get 3D World plus Bowser's Fury with faster speed and the colored stamps and Bowser's Fury, which I love. That's a great game. But the best Wii U game that I consider a Wii U game, I would say, is Pikmin 3. I love Pikmin 3. I played Pikmin 3 Deluxe, but I have Pikmin 3. I played a little bit of it on Wii U. But outside of that, Breath of the Wild is the clear winner, I would say. As we were saying, it's kind of the only generation-defining game that the Wii U had. But I'm also not the guy who loves Tropical Freeze or Bayonetta 2 or Mario Kart 8 Deluxe like some people do. So there are other options I would see other people making arguments for some of the best of that system of that generation. But Pikmin 3 and Breath of the Wild are really the ones that stick out for me.
Yeah, Matt.
I think we both know that we have to choose Breath of the Wild, otherwise we will be attacked in the car park. But I think for me specifically, the reason I picked Breath of the Wild is because it was that final little cap off to the Wii U that was just restored my faith in Nintendo a little. Yeah. Like I said, I was very on the fence about getting a Switch. I was very much like, okay, is Nintendo, kind of been there, done that now to everyone. And it just showed that, they're still going at it.
Yeah.
It restored that faith. But I think Wii U specifically, I think weirdly, Mario Kart 8, you can't lose with a Mario Kart. The point where it's still the Mario Kart now today. They've just added a word.
It's true.
What about, gentlemen, kind of the best aspect, whether it be, Dan pointed to the Amiibo integration and the fact, you could use Amiibos across so many different games, and it adds certain differences to it that you wouldn't have got without them. Whether it be, the ability to play your games away from the television should someone want to use television. What would you say is the best aspect of the Wii U?
I have a lot of Amiibo. And I think that's probably one of my favorite parts of this generation of games, is that they started selling these figures, and most of them were really high quality. It was a great way to like sort of bond with people over this generation of collecting amiibo. And like, oh, you got this one. Oh, can you pick that up at the store for me, because they're only available at certain different stores. I had a lot of fun with amiibo, but I don't really say it's one of the best parts of the Wii U, because it's more of just an aspect of Nintendo in that generation. To me, it also because I just didn't use them in the games. It was a cool novelty to have them trainable in Smash 4. And I did buy the separate NFC reader for my 3DS to train them in Smash 3DS. But I think that also simultaneously the implementation of Amiibo in so many other games is really lackluster. Getting a Pac-Man helmet in Mario Kart 8, or a different color Yoshi in Woolly World, these aren't paying $12 for a figure. That's not like you want more out of that. And so I think it also, even though it was a really fun part of this generation, it's also a half-assed idea. I mean, in terms of the implementation into games, and it still is to this day. I mean, there's not a game that's used Amiibo for significant, interesting reasons for a long time. Maybe like, I think Samus Returns had like a mode that was locked behind the Amiibo or something. But the Wii U implementation, Smash is probably the only one you can really point to.
Yep. I was just thinking that I have one single Amiibo, and I've only really used it in Smash. I think I've used it in Zelda, but it gave me like some mushrooms.
Yes.
Yeah, but also yeah, it's hard to give that as a plus towards Nintendo or the Amiibos themselves, because it seems more that's down to the actual developers of that individual game.
Yeah.
To have made it interesting and made it worth using an Amiibo.
Yeah. Though I guess I just realized I didn't really answer your question about like what the best aspect is.
Yeah.
I would say it's the first party library.
Okay.
I mean, as I said, I didn't play most of these games on Wii U, but Pikmin 3 is one of my favorite games of all time. I love 3D World. Captain Toad, that's an amazing game. Woolly World, Tropical Freeze. Yeah. And of course, Breath of the Wild, Smash 4. Like, this is a solid lineup, and there's still plenty of games on Wii U that I haven't given a significant chance that I'd like to. I mean, I never dug into Xenoblade Chronicles X or Wonderful 101, and I still have more Wii U to discover, which is interesting. Because most of my Wii U knowledge comes through the Switch. So that first party lineup, I still contend is pretty damn good, even if almost every other element of the console fails in some way.
Yeah. Matt, what about the best aspect?
You know what? We've been down talking it a lot. The tiny little touchscreen on the main actual gamepad.
Okay.
Sure.
I love having a second screen. It's strange when you first use it, but for the games that actually used it well, it felt so satisfying. Just having the important UI stuff in a separate place, and just having that almost, it's a weird mix of disconnect and immersion, where I can look at my main screen and it be, the lovely game world that I actually want to experience, and it's not chock full of UI and inventories, and then I look down and I can manage it all nice and compactly. I wish other games did that. I think, thinking back to Breath of the Wild, I think I could be entirely wrong on this. I'm pretty sure they let you view the map on your main like Wii U screen as you were exploring, and it meant I just never paused. I didn't have to stop the action. I was always just enjoying the game.
Yeah.
And going back to when I picked it up on the Switch, it was such a disappointment to now have to play a completely different pace at like the exact same game that I loved. And I think that could easily be sort of quite implemented into tons of modern games even today. Just think of how many games, AAA games especially, are just open world games with a tiny minimap constantly there. Put that bad boy down on my Wii U gamepad. Red Dead 2 port to Wii U right now.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, God.
I mean, in for example, Elden Ring, Matt might actually do you some good so you can know where the bloody hell you're going.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Couldn't know where I'm going. Well, actually, I don't know if I want to be snapping my neck off looking for the stamina bar every 2 seconds, but there's a middle ground there.
yeah, indeed. So that's it's nice to hear that, you know, someone has got one nice thing to say about the touchscreen on the gamepad. What about the worst aspect? I want to go back to, I'm afraid, a bit of negativity. Whether it be, you know, as we mentioned earlier, whether it be, you know, the fairly, especially for the time, the lackluster online offering, whether it be, you know, Tucker, you might have a different thought on the touchscreen. What would you say is the worst aspect of owning and playing on a Wii U for you guys?
I never really had any negative experiences with the Wii U because, as I said, I was never really a multiplayer gamer in this time, so the online was not a problem for me. But I would say that the worst aspect of the Wii U is that it's the Wii U, because I think that so many of these elements, whether it's starting the ideas of Amiibo or so many of these interesting first-party games coming like halfway through the system's life cycle, like Super Mario Maker or Splatoon, which I think are pretty much inarguably the most unique games. Like they're tailored for that system in really interesting ways. That the Wii U, if it had done better, could have been a lot more interesting. And I know that's kind of like a self-repeating cycle, but that if the Wii U wasn't called the Wii U and had a better marketing push and had launched with like even a better game that was a system seller, I think it could have been an upward trend rather than a presumed, as we like talk about the legacy, downward spiral of the taste that people leave in their mouth of the Wii U is that 2016 is one of the worst years of Nintendo's history, primarily because of the Wii U and thinking about Star Fox Zero and Ultra Smash and Amiibo Festival, and like people hate those games. I haven't played any of them. I don't know if I would enjoy them. I doubt it. But that, I mean, the Wii U does have a lot of great games, and the saving grace is that the Switch has saved so many of these games and given them that second shot. But I think that something like Mario Maker or Splatoon or whatever Nintendo could have done on Wii U continuing, there could be other ideas that just never came to fruition because they were like, yeah, this is just not worth our effort anymore. And they put that effort into the Switch, which did pay off. But there's an alternate future. There's an alternate reality out there where the Wii U did slightly better, stuck around for 2 or 3 more years. We got the Switch later. It launched with more powerful hardware, and we got some more interesting ideas that are using asynchronous multiplayer with the touchscreen and having such a unique controller and expanding that library of Virtual Console. But the Wii U being the Wii U kneecapped the Wii U.
Matt?
Almost exactly the same point. It is a shame that it is the Wii U, and it's even more a shame that it just isn't the Switch. I think it's such a small step between the Wii U and the Switch if you just really sit and look at it. And there's elements that the Wii U almost gets right that the Switch doesn't. I know this is a conflicting topic, but I know tons of people that don't enjoy how small the Joy-Cons are for the Switch.
Yeah.
And, that's not a problem with the gamepad.
Yeah, that is not a problem for the Wii U. It feels like there's a lot of middle grounds here. Sure, the Wii U had a lot to learn, from the Switch, but maybe the opposite could be said as well.
Sure.
So it's very interesting that you mentioned that, Matt, because our next we'll talk, obviously, that's the past. That's a decade ago. That's the Wii U, the history and the legacy of the Wii U. Looking forward at and looking to current times with the Switch, there are the statistics will tell you that Nintendo has fully recovered. Numbers that were released on the 5th of November state that to date the Switch has sold 114.7 million units. Obviously over 100 million more than the Wii U did. So that indicates that, you know, Nintendo has, you know, they've got back those that they lost with the Wii U. But do we think they have fully recovered, or is there still things from the Wii U that, or that came up in the Wii U that they still need to address, and what other aspects do they need to improve, completely separate from any conversation about a Wii U?
I think the mentality that they sort of have towards trying new things is it's in parts awesome, and you know, it gives us those amazing new consoles like the Switch. But in other ways, they almost are like, we don't care. Like, you know, they could pump out 100 different, you know, strange peripherals for a device, or I forget what it's called, but there was a thing with the Switch and cardboard and making, and I think they just need to, you know, put their head to one thing and just do that thing great. And even if that's a weird Nintendo thing, that'll be awesome. They've shown that they can nail products. I think they've just got got too many plates spinning all at once.
Yeah, I think that what's interesting about the Switch for me is that it's I think the best place that Nintendo has been in, at least from my perspective, because it shows so many signs of growth and healing that most of their consoles didn't have. I mean, you talk about the hardcore games on the Wii, you know, there's a handful of them, but that system seems to be mostly shovelware, and unfortunately that continued with the Wii U because not a lot of those serious games and ports really happened. But the Switches have been able to spring back from that, not only in sales, but in terms of breadth of games and third-party support, you know, for a lot of its life cycle. Maybe not so much anymore. But I think that Nintendo learned so much from the Wii U that is what made the Switch the success that it is, because you can't think of a way that they jump straight from Wii to Switch. The middle ground needs to be somewhere in there, and it unfortunately was, and fortunately was the Wii U. But that's not to say that the Switch is flawless or that Nintendo's not making decisions now that should be changed. But I think the Switch learned all it can from the Wii U. Maybe re-implementing what it did with the Virtual Console, or having a controller, Joy-Cons that are more robust. But yeah, no, I think that that Nintendo has learned, and this is one of the clearest examples of them learning. That from the success of the Wii, bam, down to the lowest console they've ever sold, and then back up to probably soon to be the highest console they've ever sold with the Switch.
It is very interesting with the, you know, as we look at the Switch, as you say, there are still things they need to address. I mean, for me, you know, it's a small aspect. I think it's still quite significant. I've mentioned in the past that it really kind of irks me that Nintendo they're so consistent with their pricing to their detriment. You know, they don't want, you know, Tucker and I, you know, we've talked about it previously that, for example, the Mario Party games, you know, they release them at full price when in reality, if they did them at half price, they'd be better value propositions, and then actually, you know, you would open up the possibility of more people buying them, you know, because a cartridge system means that Nintendo are able to jack the price up along with them being first party systems. You're completely right, you know, the Joy-Cons, that was always a thing that, having tried a couple people's Switches before I got my own, is that they felt flimsy. They felt, you know, they're too small for a normal person's hands. Nintendo, it's this really weird thing, as you say. You know, you go from a lot of, you know, you go back all the way to the NES with a block. Then the controllers steadily evolved to the N64 with its 3 handle controller. Then the Wii U, which is another block, and then you get, you know, the Wii U, which was sure, you know, as we said, it was like Fisher Price. You know, it was fairly robust, but it was probably the most comfortable controller that Nintendo have ever made. And then they've gone to something that, apart from the Pro controller, which is another kind of, you know, just a standard controller that the likes of Microsoft and Sony have done, their main way of playing games, is still a bit awkward in terms of, you know, having someone actually hold it. So there are still a couple of things Nintendo still need to improve, but they have obviously, you know, they have come on leaps and bounds. And as you say, Tucker, there had to be that middle ground. They couldn't go from the Wii straight to the Switch. There had to be some kind of middle ground.
Yeah. Yep.
Anything more to add, gentlemen, before we go off?
I think that analyzing each Nintendo system for its pros and its cons and its library is one of my favorite things to do, and I think that the Wii U is probably one of the most interesting ones that you can analyze. Of course, each one's interesting in its own way, but it's a clear outlier in terms of sales, in terms of reception, in terms of legacy. There's nothing like it. It pretty much almost in the history of the industry.
Yeah.
And so, as someone who really got invested in Nintendo and buying all their games with the Switch starting, I am able to like pretty much only have a retrospective look at the Wii U. And I think that in a way, like when you really start analyzing the Wii U with its pros and its library, I think you can see a system that could have done better.
Yeah.
It just is obviously kneecapped by so many things that we're able to have an over hour-long discussion about it, and keep coming up with all these fascinating points.
Matt, any closing thoughts?
Well, I think we've been well, like you say, looking back, it's very easy to see the, you know, pitfalls of a Wii U, and I think we've been quite negative about it today. But I've been sat here sort of holding the gamepad in my hands for a good while and
cradling it, kissing it a little bit,
looking down at the poor baby, and I think I'm weirdly I want to give him a second shot.
Yeah,
I might after this. I might plug it all back in and try some Zombie U or something.
Oh yeah, I might start Star Fox Zero today instead of playing some Pokemon.
I was going to say, I mean, Tucker, you've got your collection of first party Wii U games to put together, my friend. You've certainly not lacking for games to try on the Wii U.
Yeah, and that's what I'm most excited for. With the Wii U, as we look back on it, I think you're right. It's way easier to see its flaws and sort of a nebulous bird's eye point of view. But I don't think it's easier to see its pros from that angle, because while you're in the generation and you're getting a 2016 where it's Color Splash and Star Fox Zero and Ultra Smash and Amiibo Festival, and people are like, Nintendo's doomed. They're never coming back from this. But that's not in large part. That's not what the Wii U is. It is Smash 4 and Mario Kart 8 and Bayonetta and Tropical Freeze and some of the best games of their respective genres, series, and generations. And there's still more for me to try. And even with the weird games, like I want to play Ultra Smash even just for a little bit, or Color Splash, or Game & Wario. Like there is a library there to dig through that I have only begun to scratch the surface of through the Switch ports. But I've got my stack of Wii U games here. I showed you Nintendo Land and Zombie U, but I've got Yoshi's Woolly World and Wind Waker and Star Fox games and Mario Maker, Wonderful 101, Xenoblade, Pikmin 3. And I was just while during this conversation, I'm looking on eBay. I'm like, okay, how much does Color Splash cost? Like New Super Luigi U. Like there are these games to go through that I think by the end of the next decade or whatever, I'll have a really good grasp on the Wii U's library as a whole that I just don't have right now, because I've been putting my focus towards like a lot of newer games at the moment.
So a massive thank you to Tucker and to Matt and Dan as well for joining me in having a very lengthy but very insightful conversation. You can check out Dan at Daniel Navaroli on Twitter. Also, don't forget to check out the Nerdic Gods podcast. Very, very good podcast. Don't forget to check out Tucker at Tucker Hazel, and also at Backlog Banter. We've got some very, very good content consistently on Backlog Banter. There was a recent video they put up with, if I recall, should Nintendo stop with so many first-party games, which continues this conversation. And a massive thank you to my up-and-coming game development friend, Matt Curtis, for joining us. That's it. Thank you so much for watching Bloody Brilliant Games. We shall see you in the future for perhaps another long-form discussion. Don't forget to check out our weekly episodes. Thank you so much. Goodbye.